Imagine waking up to a phone call in the middle of the night from your best friend, screaming and asking for help in a dramatic fashion with hurried panic. You turn on your video camera, a FaceTime, if you will, and you see them. Except it's not them. You hear them, it's their voice. You see them, it's their face. But that's not them. And what you're staring at is a deepfake. And what you hear is a simulated synthetic voice, guided by AI, operated within an ecosystem of extended reality. We are now hardlined and head fast into an evolving world, a landscape, if you will, of misinformation and disinformation. Not less than 24 hours ago, a rather damning report just came out by the UN expressing the potential for catastrophic damage that is almost seemingly irreversible on the present chart that we find ourselves in. We are at the precipice of a time in the development of emerging technologies that we've never experienced and seen on the face of this earth, and certainly contemporary to our time. And while this may seem that I'm expressing this in such dramatic fashion, I assure you, as do so many of the many people that are with us on GatherVerse.live, and so many other people in our smaller social media pages, and we do have a few of us that are on YouTube, we assure you that these conversations that we're about to have today at GatherVerse Ethical Summit is dramatic, it's of great concern, it's urgent, it's pertinent, and necessary, and relevant. And we do know, and I am mindful of, that sometimes things do not matter until it comes knocking on your front door. But I urge you, I almost beseech you, beg you to consider that it's already knocking on your front door. You just don't know that it's there. We find ourselves in a very dramatic and a very interesting situation right now. We have a line of different people here to join us, to gather with us today, to express with us, to lean in, not to completely and definitively define ethics. Some say that ethics are stem from morals and they're agreed upon rules. Others say ethics are a thing that's a deep-seated moral of belief and faith that comes directly from my heart. Whatever ethics is, we know that we use it in a colloquial sense of a thing that we need to operate within and that we come to meet in the middle, just as GatherVerse meets at the intersection of humanity and technology. And these discussions that I hope that you're sharing today, no, we're not going to be able to show you new headsets and shiny great objects that we also enjoy, because we do. As technologists and non-technologists, we enjoy our devices, we enjoy our platforms, but for their generations to come and present generations now, we want to make sure that we are doing our level best to ensure the safety, privacy, accessibility, and to be able to educate people on what it is that we're introducing into the world and the product delivery and distributing out to the world. We've never had a more serious gather than we have today with GatherVerse. So with that, share this message, tweet, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, email, SMS, your neighbor. Let them know what's happening today, what you're experiencing, what you're witnessing to, and then ask yourself, what role do you fit within this great discussion of what we see happening with the ascendancy of these emerging technologies? Shall we begin? We're here today. May our gather be well. I've got our first guest, Adrian Rashad Driscoll, who's coming to us from the ground from Los Angeles to join us in expressing what we may be seeing when it comes to ethics, when it comes to our artistic community. Did you know that there's great things happening in the artistic community and great disruption happening right now as we speak when it comes to these emerging technologies? Adrian, we're happy to have you here, sir.
Happy to be here, Christopher. Thank you for having us. Thank you for having me.
Of course, we certainly welcome and gather with you. Adrian, let's get started. What are you seeing from your artistic lens and from the artistic communities, not just in Los Angeles, but across the world, when it comes to the express need for ethics? And what are you seeing when it comes to these emerging technologies and disruption therein, sir?
I mean, let's call it what it is. A lot of people are really afraid of AI and its trajectory right now. From the strike to just beginning creators to creators of great influence, a lot of people are afraid right now, and they have no idea what is next or what to do.
It's very interesting that you say this, because when we talk about this regenerative art that we see in these regenerative platforms, it seems to me that the world is actually missing that regeneration is just a single variable equation, but we find ourselves in a multivariable equation. In order for them to be a true regenerative process, there must be a degenerative process. And so while one thing is ascending, there must be something that's descending. And what is the dissension? The dissension is that the things that we've held on to and processes and methods that we're so used to being able to work with and organize and rely on, those are descending, many of them, and soon are more to come. Adrian, what are your real concerns when it comes to the artistic community and moving forward? And is there a light at the end of this tunnel?
So, my biggest concern is that people are going to try to avoid the technology instead of embracing it. My true belief is most of us want to do the right thing, right? But what's romanticized are the people who do the wrong thing, right? What you see in the media are the people who do the wrong things. Psychologically, we are very attracted to the villain in a picture. You know why? Not because they're relatable, but because they're not relatable, because they're very foreign to us, right? That's why villains are so cool to us. What we need to do is focus on higher security, higher authentication, things of that nature, which can show who is being or using this technology in a negative way. But running away from it, Christopher, I don't think that's the answer.
I too concur, and I agree. While many ethicists and technologists in the world are screaming, we need to stop, we need to slow down, we need to halt, and some are saying that we're good at our same pace, I disagree with both narratives. I believe that we're not moving fast enough. I said it 3 years ago, and I meant what I said, and it comes to pass now, that what happens when the technology becomes more advanced than the technologist, and where might we find ourselves? And now that has come to pass, and the tempo and the cadence of technology has accelerated. Does it feel faster to you now, Adrian?
Absolutely. I mean, things are growing at such a rapid pace. A few years ago, AI was still seeming very fictional, and then just last year, to a lot of people, it became very real, and it's been around for many, many moons, right? So it feels accelerated because so many people they've stayed away from it. They've ran from the technology, and now it's caught up, and the fear is that it's going to pass us.
That's an incredible point, Adrian. I sit here and think about it, that in some small, very meandering and finite way, we've all contributed to the acceleration and the development of artificial intelligence, these generative pre-trained transformers and large language foundational models, sir. Adrian, we're always happy to have you here. Keep doing the hard work that you're doing. When it comes to artistic community, everyone that's with us today, give Adrian a shout out. He's definitely a good guide to be able to help you understand where we're at when it comes to extended reality, artistic communities, and much more. Thank you very much, Adrian.
Thank you, Christopher. Peace, everyone.
Yes. Coming up next, we have our guest, Stacey Ann Berry, who comes to us from a very special place in Canada. Yes, we do enjoy our relationships with everyone around the world in this global gathering. When it comes to GatherVerse, we have voices not just here with North America, because if we only had voices here in North America, we'll get North American results. That's not what we're getting after. Audience, for those that are in the YouTube today, and we see the many thousands of you here with us today at GatherVerse.live, we're happy to have you here. For those that are in the chat today, what is ethics to you? What does it mean to you? Are you concerned with what you're seeing when it comes to AI? And what might the marriage pairing between the metaverse or spatial computing, extended reality look like at this intersection of AI? But more so important, what matters to you most? Accessibility, education, community development, equality, equity, safety, privacy, wellness, ethics? We bring Stacey Ann Berry with us, and we're bringing her now to the stage. Stacey, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're so happy to have you with us today here at Ethical. Stacey Ann Berry, can you let everyone know who are you? And moreover, why are you here today?
Well, professionally, I have a very diverse background. My disciplines of study include public policy, history, law, as a lot of community development principles. I'm someone who's deeply involved in my community from a community development perspective. And I'm really concerned with the impact that technology will have on our civil liberties and human rights.
I too am concerned, and thank you for being able to join us today for this very special gather. We're always happy to have you here. Audience, we're about to lean in. Go and tell your neighbors, tell a friend, tell somebody what's happening right now. We have a lot of wood to chop. Stacey, I want to go into the vestiges of corporations because they have the biggest deal flow, the biggest capital expenditures, the biggest product delivery teams. We know their names. We know where they're at, not just here in Silicon Valley, transmetropolitan, transcontinental. I want to go and look into the world of leadership for a second when it comes to ethics. Do we need chief technology ethical officers in our workplaces and startups?
I think we need to have a framework that's external to the corporate players, because when it's internal within the companies, of course, this ethical officer could be very biased and if the government's auditing or say a nonprofit community wants to know, best practices being incorporated, it could be biased in favor of the company that's hiring this ethical officer. So I'm of the opinion, and in Canada, we have something called a privacy commissioner at the federal and the state level, which is a province. And that's the person that ensures there's right checks and balances external to the government, typically very nonpartisan. And they're not just checking the government to make sure they're not going too far with violating our privacy rights. They're also seeing what's happening in the private sector and ensuring that there's that balance. So I feel like you kind of need an external person who is nonpartisan, appointed by the government, where there is that public engagement and an opportunity for the public to have a say and to set those standards of best practices to ensure that, the corporations aren't pushing boundaries to the point where we're giving up our civil liberties for convenience and for speed and for security. I know a lot of people want to go faster, and we're so used to having a 30-second time span, but also there's some consequences to that. There's also a lot of people that don't have access to technology. And with that being said, those who are in the space that have the access aren't thinking of those that don't have access. So when we digitize essential services like healthcare or even job searching, and many of these platforms, you have to go online to see the jobs they're posting. They're not thinking of those people who are very vulnerable in society who don't even have access to the internet. So you kind of need this ethical officer just to ensure we always have free choice, right? There's shouldn't be just one way to access essential services. So if we look at digitization, we're kind of going in that direction. That's where I have the most concern.
Indeed. And when I sit here and think about, even as a single variant, when it comes to one solo position of the process of a chief technical ethical officer in companies and corporations, I also think about the express need for the formulation or really the formation of groups developing within these organizations as well, specifically and solely dedicated toward ethical development and guidance when it comes to the ecosystem of information. The report just came out from UN, which is a very heavy report with great consideration of the power and the leverage that these great, big, massive social media platforms have really grown, especially over the past 15 years, largely unchecked and unregulated when it comes to the information that's being distributed by their cohorts and participants that operate within these social media platforms, such as all of us. When I think about it, Stacey, what are your thoughts on that when it comes to misinformation and disinformation? Misinformation meaning, hey, I'm putting out this information, honest Abe, I thought it was good information, I thought it was relevant, I thought it was honest, it wasn't, versus disinformation where there's a bit of mischief at hand at play.
And the manipulation of it, which is more dangerous. I'm so someone who works closely with youth and then, the younger generation and who's worked in the education system, whether it's voluntarily or professionally. I'm just really concerned with how the manipulation is changing how we think and kind of conditioning more so the next generation than ours or older to this kind of groupthink where you're not able to assess a different perspective on a certain topic because it's already being presented to you by somebody who's, gathering this information who may already have certain types of biases. And so that's where it can become really dangerous because you're almost removing the ability for people to look at information in all that it has and then make your own assessments and judgment as to how you want to interpret this information. So I think when you lose the ability to see and think for yourself, we're in a very dangerous place in society. I think we should be maximizing our power to be critical thinkers, to see for ourselves, to be innovative within our own makeup of how we can do that. And so I think when we start to skew, manipulate, and then give false information, you're changing history, you're changing facts. It has also led to real cases where people have been falsely accused through some of these platforms where there's people who are being named in cases that have nothing to do with the case. This is very public information. And then now you have defamation lawsuits and things like that happening. So it's really essential that there is a guideline and a framework, and even just disclosing that this was produced by AI. This image, was produced by ChatGPT. This message was produced by ChatGPT. And so I think that just allows people to make their own conclusions as opposed to having a system that decides for you. So that would be my take on that.
Indeed. And Stacey, is it sufficient to say when it comes to legislators and when it comes to policy, not just within the Canadian region, but throughout the world, that they're having a difficult time keeping up with this technology that's being distributed and released?
They sure are. And there's a lot of reasons to that. So I am in the world of lobbying. And there's those who lobby for the best interests of people, and there's those who lobby for the best interests of their shareholders, right? And so sometimes when money is a motivating factor, it can cloud judgments. And unfortunately, not the best decisions are always made. And we can see that in various sectors. It's not just unique to tech. And so this is sometimes what makes it hard for even the elected officials to do the right things by their constituents, as opposed to those who are going to their political fundraisers and financially keeping them in office. And unlike, the States, Canada has a little bit of a stricter guideline around what corporate companies can donate to elected officials. The landscape's a little bit different, a little more regulated, but it's not to say those type of things aren't happening. And so there needs to be accountability on all sides. Like our elected officials or the government shouldn't be so dictative to private sector because we also don't want to stifle innovation. We just want to make sure that people have the choice to choose to participate in this, digital infrastructure or not. Just when it comes to essential services, I just really feel it's critical that everyone has a choice on how to access, because we have to think about people with disabilities. We have to think about seniors. We have to think about even those who are formerly incarcerated coming into a brand new world, youth in foster care, and people that just don't have the digital skills and the certain training that's required to adapt to an all digitized or world that's relying so heavily on technology to do everything. And so it is a balancing act, and we need to make sure the right players are in place to make sure that we have a balance that's as fair for as many people as possible.
It certainly is a real concern incident when we think about private sector, but also, as you express, public sector. And when I think about public sector, it seems to me, and audience, I hope that I'm wrong with this, but I get the sense that there's a real demand and need coming down the pipeline for UBI, universal basic income. I get the real sense that governments are going to have a really difficult time wrapping their mind around what are the better framework and approach towards universal basic income for the citizens of the land. And by the time they do come up with the operational framework, will it be fair and just? And will it be plenty enough to be able to distribute for all citizens with a sense of equity? And at the same time, in a land where the price of avocado has been more higher than it's ever been before, inflation is a real deal, is a real thing. Will it be sustainable? I do have these concerns, but when I also look at the different industries that are impacted by what we're seeing with these technologies, Stacey, I think about something maybe as simple as travel. Travel being impacted when it comes to ingress and egress in this world where everyone travels around the world. It may not seem a big deal, but at the bigger scheme of things, in the macro sense, I believe that it's a very big, dramatic deal when we just look at simple things like travel.
But I wanted to comment on the UBI and then get into travel, if that's okay.
Please.
So with the universal basic income, it is an interesting concept, but I'm of the opinion, the fact that we need to have it, we need to ask why. We need to get to the root causes of why some people don't have stable income and why there's income inequalities and issues of making housing more affordable and issues of where a house is no longer a home, it's a commodity. So of course, the speculation in the market for those in the real estate industry is great for them, but for those who don't have those privilege and opportunities, then we have this issue where the prices go through the roof. We've also now are importing so much of our food. Of course, if it's not grown locally, it's going to cost you more to import it, right? So we need to also start thinking about agriculture and the need to support local farmers and farmlands that is actually getting eaten up. At least in Canada, there's over 300 acres being lost a day by developers, right? So there's not, everything is kind of lopsided where, you know, one sector who has more money and the ability to lobby is getting more of what they need for their purpose and for the profits that they're driven by. And then another sector that we all rely on, which is food, the staff of life, is being hurt in the process. So we also need to think of some of these root causes of why UBI is needed. We know that people aren't being trained for, you know, the innovation age. There's an educational gap. So if we don't have enough people in the factory system being trained on how to use some of this new technology, well, then they just don't have the skills to participate, but they should have the right to work. And there should be some other way to think about how to upskill. And this is why Blacks in Technology, which I'm a part of and you're a part of, is so essential, because part of what we're focusing on is upskilling those who are typically disenfranchised. So I just wanted to comment on that. And in terms of the facial recognition, so in Canada very recently, and it's a pilot, our major airport in the country is now implementing facial recognition as a way to travel and board. So it may sound convenient to a lot of people. This is great. We can just get on the airport, 2 seconds, no lineups. But then people have to take a pause and understand there's biases in this facial recognition. We know that there's research out of MIT from Dr. Joy Blumwini, who has been doing amazing work with her team and other experts who've been quoted about the biases towards people with dark skin, women, children, and seniors are not being correctly identified or even misidentified, and sometimes being misidentified of being a criminal or being involved in a certain criminal activity. So this now can hinder your ability, if you fit in that group, to freely travel and move from country to country. And so this is where, again, the option of choices. You want to have it optionally for those who want to use it, that's fine. But that should not be the only way that someone who looks like me should travel, because of the biases and the issues within the technology itself. But then it's not just the biases, it's also the sharing of our biometric makeup, right? Who's holding the data of our biometric makeup that then could be hacked and then be used to access your financial information, because people are logging into their bank and their phones with that information. And unlike a password, we can't just reset our biometric makeup. Like once somebody has that, they have it. We can't change it and reset it the way you could with a password. So again, there should be alternative ways to use these things so people could have the choice. If you're comfortable with using the facial recognition to travel, you should have that choice. You want to have other means of using it should be there. If you're old-fashioned, like some of the elders in our community, they want to just use the traditional paper route, they should just have that choice, because again, there's barriers as to why not everybody can digitally adopt and easily use this type of technology. And if travel is essential, we don't want to add barriers to make it more difficult in the name of convenience and speed, right?
Well expressed. And for the audience there, we're talking about biometrical identity. We're talking about your expression, your anatomical identity. We're talking about platforms that have the express capability to be able to do full, almost near human eye resolution scans of your whole entire likeness, if you will, and to be able to operate this human eye resolution avatar, such as a Kodak avatar, which was presented to us by Meta back in October. That's a real concern when I think about the ability to be able to control a deep fake in real time. My question is, does Mark Zuckerberg own my likeness and image? And if so, that's a problem for me operating within his operating within his ecosystems of social platforms that are rather abundant, which you'll find in the UN report. Audience, do you want Mark Zuckerberg owning your likeness and image? And that's no disrespect to the hardworking people of Meta, because I do enjoy relationships with Meta, but I also do see a slew of policy people being dismissed and fired from these platforms. I see some of the people that are working internally at the front lines, ensuring safety and privacy within these platforms, being easily dismissed, and they are fired. They have no place to be able to come back to, doing the same guidance and helpful work that they are working with in external organizations. And here's the rub for me, based on what you just expressed, Stacey. When I think about all the different organizations that are out here when it comes to safeguarding technology, I had the opportunity to go to a small little place called Tübingen University in Europe some weeks ago, and I met with brilliant ethicists, women leadership that really met at the symposium, talking about the different things that we need to do and should be diligently steadfast in moving on when it comes to AI and when it comes to the metaverse and other emerging technologies. Here's my point. Were they ever heard? Who listened to them when they expressed? Who listens to organizations like the XR Guild or XRSI? Who listens to these platforms out here that are really leaning in and doing the hard work? These corporations could benefit from listening to these smaller organizations who have dedicated much of their mission towards making sure that we are ethically inbound and keeping safe with what we are innovating today. And to end this, if we're ever going to get this right, we have to build and start guiding and leading from the heart and what we're about to hand down to our younger people, because everything that you said, Stacey, gives me much concern and more. I am thankful for your time, Stacey. We are thankful for your time. So many of the thousands that are with us here on Ethical and on GatherVerse.live, and those that are around us, audience, we'll be back soon. We'll continue this to go forward. Stacey, audience, embrace this person that's with us today.
Thank you.
Welcome. This is Dr. Ingrid Vasiliu-Feltes, and it is a privilege to deliver this keynote today, centered on building a trustworthy, explainable, and responsible GatherVerse. Please allow me to share a brief keynote overview. First, I will highlight a few global landscape trends that are defining our society and economy. Then I will emphasize some of the challenges we must overcome, as well as opportunities that lie ahead of us. I will conclude with a few thoughts on further research and development. When we examine the global landscape, it's important to note the changes in demographics that are also causing changes in the employment landscape. Additionally, over the last decade, we have observed increased investments in frontier technologies, and it is expected to continue over the next few years. Please allow me to share a few of these top tech trends that are reshaping our society and digital economy. Here are a few of the tech megatrends, such as hyperconnectivity, zero trust cyber resilience, 5G, and over the last few months, generative AI has taken the world by storm. There are a few other emerging trends we must pay attention to. 6G, whole genome sequencing and gene editing, autonomous systems, hydrogen fuel, 3D printing, digital twins technologies are all on the agenda of forward-thinking companies. There are also a few frontier tech trends that we can forecast over the next few years, such as transitioning to the next generation of the World Wide Web, called Web 3.0, satellite internet, 10G, building out the current nascent metaverse towards a global industrial metaverse and omniverse, as well as quantum computing and technologies and human-computer interfaces that are expected to make the leap from innovation and academia to the commercial arena. Enterprise leaders can also use this latest Gartner published matrix to guide their enterprise strategy. Not only do they need to understand over the next few years how to predict the tech trends, but also how to align them with their business goals. Here are a few challenges we must overcome. From a technology perspective, cyber threats have dominated the C-suite and boardroom agendas. From a people's perspective, the skills gap, skills migration, and talent retention will have to be addressed. From a process perspective, we must continue our efforts to improve interoperability for converging frontier technologies, develop custom standards, and custom KPIs and metrics for these. Similarly, old traditional funding methods will not be amenable to the digital era, and we must develop alternative investment instruments. We also have opportunities that we must capitalize on. These are, of course, purpose-driven leadership, building proactive digital ethics programs, proactive cyber resilient programs, embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion into the design of our enterprise strategy, as well as early alignment with UN SDG 2030 and UN Net Zero 2050 agendas. When we look at how a proactive digital ethics program looks like, a few core values emerge: transparency, accountability, privacy, data governance, inclusion, non-discrimination, sustainability, and perhaps most importantly, human-centered design. There are also a few drivers of success for digital ethics programs: ethical literacy and fluency, ethical leadership and ethical governance, as well as ethics by design when building a culture of ethics for this new global tech-enabled ecosystem. Extremely important is also ethics integration with the rest of enterprise strategy, as well as designing custom ethics KPIs and metrics to be successful and measure our impact. Please allow me to also share a few thoughts for further research and development. As we have witnessed, we are facing major challenges, and some of those challenges can be addressed with reshaping, rethinking, and reconfiguring our global education ecosystem. And that starts from preschool to the boardroom. We must also think about reshaping our degrees to transcend typical industry verticals in order for our future leaders to be able to handle these convergent technology ecosystem. Additionally, having a global digital code of ethics might be very helpful in this digital era to guide enterprises and prevent some of the lack of digital trust that we have seen over the last few years. Additionally, I would like to call on global stakeholders to think about international ethics-centric diplomacy, where we encourage ethical leadership and ethical proactive programs from the beginning. Additionally, in order to build a diverse, equitable, and inclusive global digital ecosystem, having a DEI-centric diplomacy effort would also be highly helpful. Thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts today, and I'm looking forward to hearing the other presentations and encouraging all of you to reach out to me on social media. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Avi Bar-Zeev. I'm the president of the XR Guild. I've been working in this space for over 30 years, working on Disney VR back in the 90s, Amazon Echo Frames, Microsoft HoloLens, and most recently I worked on the Apple Vision Pro, helping to lead the experience prototyping. And I want to talk today not so much about technology, but about ethics. And what I've learned over the span of 30 years about ethics has led me to want to spend a lot more time on this and try to help out wherever I can with ethics in the field. And I think we have to start by just asking, what is ethics? What does it really mean? People have different ideas of what it might be. One, a moral or religious duty, or perhaps a duty to each other. Or maybe we just carefully consider our choices, or maybe you consider ethics just a bunch of BS. Think about which one of these is the right answer for you, and I'll show you the results of a poll I did on Twitter a while back. Most people thought it was our duty to each other, which is actually a pretty good answer. But then you have to start asking questions depending on which of these choices you pick. There's some follow-on questions. One, if it's a moral or religious duty, to which set of predetermined values should we adhere? There's lots of different moral or religious frameworks. So which one is the right one? It's a little hard to pick sometimes. If it's a duty to each other, to whom do we owe this duty? Is it to everybody, or is it only to people in our community, or people in our country, or people in our company? That you have to pick, and it's not so easy to pick. Maybe it's everybody, but it's really hard to think about that. Now, C is a little more practical. It says, let's just consider all the choices, and let's try to make the best choices that we can, do the most good and the least harm. And it can be much more pragmatic because you don't have to think as much about the first two choices. And if you said D, then we really have to ask, do you believe in hedonism or nihilism, or are you potentially a sociopath and you just simply don't care about ethics? And there are certainly a number of people who would say yes, if they were honest about that. That exists. In history, ethics has been important to us. There are places where ethics has worked and places where it hasn't worked. Here's some examples maybe of where it hasn't worked.
Apart from the sanitation, the medicine, education, wine, public order, irrigation, roads, the freshwater system and public health, what have the Romans ever done for us?
Exactly. What have the Romans ever done for us? I mean, we think about situations like Manifest Destiny, where it was all about just pushing the population to go west and colonize, regardless of who already lived there, regardless of the conditions for the colonists. Every colonial empire has pretty much behaved the same way. They've certainly built things, they've certainly done great work, but they really didn't care very much about the people. And I think we can look at the World Wide Web and say that's pretty much the same thing that happened there. It's another sort of manifest destiny. And with the metaverse, we might call it metaverse destiny, the same idea. Screw the people, let's just make sure that the thing gets built. So there's some examples of where ethics has worked. The Hippocratic Oath for doctors, the military code of conduct, because there's just so much power the military has over subordinates. Other places it's worked. These are good models. Now, who needs ethics? We've seen cases where Google has laid off ethicists, Microsoft has laid off ethicists, Facebook has done some things that we don't like, and our friend Elon Musk certainly doesn't seem to understand what ethics are whatsoever. These people definitely need ethics, and they need it in a big way. But where are they getting it from? They're not getting it from the experts, and they're not getting it from any internal resource. And this is a problem overall, that in computer science and in AI and XR especially, there's no training for ethics. We don't train people for this. We're starting to, but I never had classes on this in school. And a lot of people I know never had classes on this. It sounds boring. It's philosophical. You think, oh yeah, ethics is all that moral stuff that we'd already talked about. One of the best places to get a good lesson on ethics is actually watching the show The Good Place. And it's not the lessons necessarily that Chidi gave at the blackboard. Those are meant to be boring looking. It's the fact that every episode was about ethical issues. And whatever was talked about at the blackboard was rendered practical by the discussions, by the dialogue between the characters and what they had to focus on. That's where you really got the lesson in ethics. And I think that's a better way to present it to most people. So we see ethics show up in a lot of places. We see it show up in user-centered design thinking, people who talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. A lot of that discussion is essentially about ethics. It's about trying not just to do what's right, but to do what's best. And if we don't, we have all these unintended consequences, even if we mean well, even if we think we mean well. If we don't follow a set of principles, we are going to have unintended consequences. Principles are there because we will have thought through as many of these things as we can. So wouldn't it be great if every PM in every big company, everybody who had to make decisions in terms of products and users and design, would have the luxury of having more support in their roles to be more ethical? That means more people around them to make ethical choices with them, to have discussions, to debate the options, and to try to come up with the best answers. Wouldn't that be great? That's what we're trying to do. So we started this group called the XR Guild, and it's meant for any professionals in the field to join. The idea is just say you're a professional, but you have to agree to a set of ethical principles in order to join. That's really the only requirement right now. You don't even have to pay dues right now. The idea is the more people we can get to join, the more ethical discussions we have, the more we can normalize this. So what can we do as a guild? Here's what we hope to accomplish. We want to support each other when making ethical decisions. We want to be able to give to have each other's back. When somebody has to stand up to the boss who's saying, get it done fast, we want to say, get it done right. And we want to give them the ammunition to say, you know what, it's actually going to be cheaper to do it the right way. So let us go with that. We want to publish videos and guidance and do whatever we can to help people understand the choices that have already been made before, the mistakes that have been made. Let's not make the same mistakes again. If we need to make mistakes, let's make all new ones and not the same ones over and over again. We're going to provide mentoring, one-on-one, and teaching in groups. We don't have to reach everybody. We know we can't reach everybody. But if we get to some kind of herd immunity where we get to maybe 70% of people in the field, that's going to be enough for the folks who aren't subscribed to this to at least know about it and to feel like, okay, they have to take it seriously. They have to pay attention. We need to make it normal to consider ethics in every decision. So here are those principles that I talked about. They're important. We've debated these. They can change. We have a democratic process for updating these, but these are the ones that we have right now. Starts out with number one. The most important ethical principle we have is that every person matters. And even the quietest voices are sometimes the most important to listen to. So we want to make sure we're respectful and that we can tolerate and respect everybody, both the customers, but the people in the process as well. We've realized through a lot of hard work that freedom and privacy don't come cheap. They're human rights. We have to protect them. We have to do whatever we can to ensure that we're not trampling those rights. And that also includes listening to everybody, because I'm not going to know all the right answers. I have my own lived experience and I have my own biases, and I need to listen to other people who have different experiences. That's true of everybody in the field. We are going to try to teach what we know to increase the dialogue, the understanding and learning so that everybody gets the same benefit. And when it comes to the metaverse or XR, the hardware and software are for everybody. We want to make sure that people are not shut out of the process, that no individual or company or country should be able to control the metaverse or whatever we want to call it at the end of the day. Metaverse and XR should move towards being interoperable, open, and extensible. We know it's not going to start on day one. And as we can see, some of the biggest companies are going to build their walled gardens. And in some ways, the walled gardens are there to protect us, but they're also there to lock us in. So at the right time, we need to be able to leave those gardens and explore the greater world. The software and the hardware should benefit the end users and their community. This is so important for companies whose business model is exploitive. That's just not going to be okay in the future. The exploitation is going to get worse and worse. We want to make sure that the only people who are benefiting from this are the people who are using the products themselves, not some hidden customer who's there advertising to us or trying to make money off our backs. In the field, what's important is that we're responsible for our individual decisions. If you see something, say something. We have to bring things up. We can't just quietly say everything's okay. When bad things happen, it's our responsibility to try to make them better. We also know that design patterns that trick or confuse people are dangerous. We have to call those out. We should make sure that they're exposed and fixed. And we have a duty to help mitigate serious problems wherever possible. These are the ethical principles that we adhere to. These are things that we espouse, and we're going to try to make sure are uniform as much as possible across the field. So we hope you'll join us. Come to xrguild.org, check it out, and let us know what you think. And remember, once you're in the guild, everything is negotiable. We can change these things, we can improve these things, and we want to evolve. We want to take your opinions into account. Thank you, and may your gather be well.
Greetings and welcome to our first roundtable discussion for Ethical. For audience, those that have been with us since the beginning, we certainly hope that you've been enjoying and taking in what's been expressed as of late. At this very important discussion, we have thousands that are with us at GatherVerse.live, several that are with us at YouTube, LinkedIn, and other different places that we distribute around the web and around the globe. This discussion that we have now is navigating the ethical landscape of AI from bias and privacy to workforce displacement, ethical and policy considerations, and beyond. I'm adored and imbued with such a cast that's with us today. Amie Lewis, a founder of DigiGlobe and VR Media, Boahen, a graduate student at UMass, DACSS, Andrew Susman of IAEA, co-founder at Institute for Advertising Ethics, Claire Weingarten, a founder of Living Machines Media, member of the XR Guild. We welcome you all. We have a lot to get started. Audience, for those that are with us, share this. We won't be presenting any new head-mounted displays or spatial computing debates for you today. We've had quite a bit of that, haven't we? And no, we won't be introducing a new generative pre-trained transformer. But what we will benefit to stand today of what we will distribute is information that leads us to hopefully being able to enjoy these products of innovation that we all enjoy and that we like and care for. For without ethics, I truly believe that we cannot enjoy what's coming down the pipeline because we may not have a world to enjoy it in. And yes, it's that serious. Shall we begin? Claire, I have a consideration of interest, and I want you to lead us into how do we balance the potential for AI to drive economic growth and social progress with the potential threats to job displacement and security that we're seeing today?
Yes, well, absolutely. There's a lot of opportunity with AI in terms of enhancing creativity, entrepreneurship, and other human-only activities. So I think there's a lot of benefit there, but I think obviously there are a lot of perils with job loss. And I think one of the things we need to do there is to educate and retrain and upskill people so that they can use their creativity, they can use these human-centric abilities instead of, having older jobs replaced. Then I also believe in universal basic income. I'm a big fan of that. I think that's very important to smooth over the issue now. And I also think in terms of security, cybersecurity is of the utmost importance, but I also believe informed consent and education are extremely important. And I think that helps in terms of, preserving jobs and changing our economy, but also that people know what they're getting into, understand how AI is being used, have a path of recourse when something happens that is unfair because of AI. I'm a strong proponent of glass box AI, so explainable AI. So decisions perhaps are being made, perhaps they're sentencing decisions, loan decisions, job decisions, really, really important decisions. But the people ultimately see why these decisions are made, see, understand and weigh how the algorithm is processing these decisions so that there's always a human in the loop and people know, what's going on. They aren't just getting these yes or no answers or these decisions without any explanation.
We're going to come back to that, and we're going to put a pin in that. And thank you for sharing that, Claire. Eli, when we talk about Glassbox AI, I want to be able to draw that out a little bit more. But Eli, I'd ask you the same. When it comes to job security and in this world, as someone that's a graduate student heading into this wide landscape of hopeful opportunity, but seeing the opportunity is slipping and weighing in some ways, and that the careers as we know it of yesterday and that we signed up for to go to school for, to go to college and work so desperately hard for, they may not be readily available as we once thought that they were, as abundant. What are your concerns with that, Eli? And let's hear you unmute your mic, please.
Yeah, so as per usual for the digital interface, can you all hear me? I take that laugh as a yes. Yeah, my concerns are not only what opportunities are going to lie for folks ahead, but also what world is going to lie ahead for us. Part of the reason why I decided to go and return to education and study at UMass in their data analytics and computational social science program is because I felt that it was imperative to study and earn those data skills while also looking at the social impact of the technologies that we're creating, designing, and launching. So I am concerned about the opportunities that exist for folks or that may not exist for folks, even the ones that they're training for right now in the middle of their studies. But I am deeply concerned for the world that they'll have to be in after graduating and how their skills might be utilized in ways that may go against their own ethical considerations.
Indeed. Thank you, Eli. We much appreciate that. Audience, to you, those that are at home or in the workplace, on a subway, on a train, there's many of you in many different places in this virtual world where we've become more virtual in the past 34 months than we had the past 34 years. And it seems to me that we're not going back. The way is forward. When I think about it, Andrew, and for audience that are there, is job security a concern for you right now? For our YouTube gang that's over there, drop a few notes in the comments. And to you at home or that's on GatherVerse.live, ask yourself that. And in some ways, let us know what you might think and feel free or stay pat where you're at. Andrew, when I think about this next consideration of oversight as AI systems becoming more sophisticated and autonomous, how can we maintain human oversight without stifling innovation?
Mm-hmm. Right. There has to be a delicate dance between innovation and policy, of course, because overregulation can lead to errors as sometimes damaging as underregulation. The one premise to go from and to consider is that the law doesn't have eyes. That simply because we create more laws doesn't mean that people are going to act more ethically. It's actually the people that are in the position of doing the work on the ground that are making the ethical decisions. So it is our belief, it's our opinion that education is critical for the professionals that are doing the work that's companion educational to the technical education that they typically do. I would only also say, because I've been listening to everything, I salute you, Christopher Lafayette, for creating this feeling and for making people feel so comfortable to say what they want to say. It's wonderful, and it's unusual and incredibly unpretentious for something like this. So what I would say is, in AI and all of the systems that you're talking about today are advertiser funded for the most part. Most of what is AI or purports to be AI is advertiser funded. That's $1.4 trillion a year in investment going into the system. That's a massive incentive that's hard to overcome, no matter who you are or what. The FTC only has 50 lawyers in their advertising staff, facing thousands of opponents. So to a certain extent, you need to get in and start educating people. What we've done is a certification that students who are studying advertising are now taking as mandatory curriculum, and is offered in the learning management systems of agencies and advertisers, so that you start to create a set of people who have a reference point. The final thing that I would say is this: our problems do not exist in a historical vacuum. In the 1900s, when print came along, there were very bad actors that started to be abusive, selling drugs and property that weren't real. And larger consumers started to complain to Congress. Congress threatened to regulate. The ad business cleaned itself up, or it would be regulated. Radio and television had commercial acceptance practices and standards and practices. For the last 20 years, this industry of digital media has had no quality controls. And so that's where a lot of the bankruptcy has come. The quality controls need to be reintroduced.
The very fascinating consideration, Andrew, and thank you for the shout out to the hard work that all of us at GatherVerse do. It's certainly not just me, but the whole team of us, and we couldn't do it without our community. I tell you what, and just to be completely candid and honest, there was a time not too long ago where I wondered, does GatherVerse even serve a purpose? Does it even matter for us to even have these sessions? Audience, I ask you in real time, does GatherVerse serve a purpose? Is there a benefit for us being here, for us being able to spread the information and accurate information of expression with ethics? And I found myself at a place called Tübingen University a few weeks ago, and I've never felt more empowered about the mission that we're at when it comes to the intersection of technology and humanity, because we put so much emphasis at that intersection on technology, but not enough emphasis at the intersection of defining what humanity is. And when I thought about all the different expressions that we have had with GatherVerse and all the different community members we have, I feel, and some may not agree, but I feel like GatherVerse is helping lead with great necessity to organize leading organizations that care. And that's our role, is to force, multiply, and amplify the voices of you all. So we hope that you certainly have seen a benefit with GatherVerse, and we hope that you would continue to share these events that we have here. And Andrew, on a more further point, our Oceania director, Sarah Cole Stratton, her and I were talking about the invention of the print press and what a great disruption that happened when the print press came about, at a time where people weren't distributing information and writing in such a different way that was relatable to the print press, and how many jobs at that time were disrupted because of the print press. In other words, in this time of regeneration, we must consider that there's a degeneration that must happen. Amie, we're bringing the focal point and the highlight to you, because I know that you've been doing a lot of study judiciously as of late and for some time when it comes to AI. I'm going to break from tradition from our questions that we have, which we have a lot of ways to go. But I want you to be able to share with our audience live here in real time with GatherVerse Ethical. What have you been looking at when it comes to ethics, when it comes to AI, and what are some of your concerns?
I've just, been learning everything possibly that I can. And as far as ethics and my concerns, I think that we're not going to be able to educate fast enough for, like, in comparison to how quickly AI is evolving. And I think that's going to be a major concern to have jobs that are in place. I'm concerned with, like, usually the most vulnerable people, in any situation usually are hurt the worst. And there's just like a large lack of education or even acknowledgement right now of what AI is to certain, people in certain geographical areas, socioeconomic situations. And I don't know what the exact answer is, but I know that I mean, we need to do something. And I just don't see, though, how we would be able to educate that large of a population that quickly, like in comparison. That's like my main concern.
I agree. And when we think about some of the things that we talk about that may seem finite, but really impactful, such as these events that we're having, peer-to-peer expressions and real-time distributed amounts of information and education. And we have organizations around the world, certainly across this country, XR Guild or Blacks in Technology, that could reach out to different communities to really start doing the work and leading in, not just educating the people, but educating the corporations on what it is that they're innovating and what they're building. That may be my bigger concern. A comment that was said in our WhatsApp community with GatherVerse, and we encourage y'all to join there. There's a link on the homepage of gatherverse.org, but someone made the comment, and I thought it was a very interesting comment. And Sarah had expressed that it's usually about the people and not the technology, as a paraphrase, and the people are the problem and not completely the technology. But as I sit here and think about it at the same time, where I see the benefit and I absolutely see where she's going, I do have a concern about the technology that we're innovating and that we're putting out there for people to have access in the first place. And should we be building these types of technologies that are out there? Eli, I'm going to dance back to you real quick. How should organizations transparently communicate the use of AI systems and their potential impact on individuals and societies themselves?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. It's actually one that we discussed in this past semester. I took a ethical considerations with Dr. Trim at UMass, and we talked about how do we hold people accountable, because I feel like that is a huge issue. We're creating technologies without means and pathways for upholding accountability, and then blaming the lack of understanding on those who are interacting with the technology. So in my personal opinion, I feel like if you cannot find a way to transparently communicate the technology that a person is interacting with, how can they truly consent to that interaction?
It's very interesting. Drop the mic. Claire, let's pick it back up. I want to go back to what we talked about with Glass AI, but I'd like for you to be able to express on the same question that I just asked of Eli, but I also want you to express to the benefit of why these external organizations such as the Guild and others mean so much to what we look at when it comes to the framework and the way of moving forward when it comes to process, method, and development, and the relatability of good information that's been centralized by ethicists and by those who just simply care.
Yeah, I think that informed consent is very important. I believe technology companies need to let consumers know what is going on while they're using their technology in terms of the data they're handing over and the privacy they're giving up and why they're doing that. I think Apple does a great job of doing that in terms of when it provides an update, it tells you why. I believe all companies should need to do that when it comes to education. I think education is integral. Digital education, digital literacy needs to be taught in school. The same way we have health class, we should be taught about social media and AI and have a basic literacy in that. I believe there should be education funding to go out into the community, and that the companies building this technology should be responsible for that. So I believe there should be public campaigns to inform people, advertising out in the public, social influencers, that kind of stuff, and that program should be, offered to libraries, to religious institutions, and that should be funded by the companies building this technology, who are infinitely benefit from it when, it's our data they're benefiting from. And just back to the organizations that you talked about, there's one that I'm a part of called All Tech is Human. They do a great job of outreach. A number of these organizations have courses you can take. They have a tech stewardship course. The Center for Humane Technology has a course as well. But something that I really like that All Tech is Human is doing is they have working groups and they put out papers and they actually invite the public to contribute to these working groups. I worked on a paper on technology and democracy recently. And, they can bring in 100 people from all different disciplines, a lot of academics, people in policy, people in government, to contribute to these and work collaboratively. And I think in doing that, people become ambassadors for the work. So, everyone will go out and share with their network that they worked on that project. So it really is inclusive in terms of allowing people to participate in recommendations for governance and various other things. It helps people think critically, but it also helps turn them into ambassadors to spread the word more broadly.
Indeed. And you remind me and you bring up great points. And thank you for sharing about this organization that certainly is new to me. And this is the point. There are many of these organizations that are doing yeoman's work, if you will, really good work that are out there. Oftentimes I hear the call for more framework, but it seems to me, an audience, tell me how you feel. It seems to me, Claire, that there is already a lot of frameworks out there that simply don't see the light of day. They serve the benefit of a rock in a garden. It doesn't grow. And part of that is because they spend so much human engineering and human capital developing these frameworks. And when it's time to launch and share it to the world, they have no marketing distribution to be able to share it to, number one. And part of the setback is there's just not enough capital of interest invested. Venture capitalists aren't looking to invest in frameworks. Angel investors aren't looking to invest in frameworks. So who are the people that are investing in the frameworks that literally could be the saving of the technology industry and other industries that stand to go through severe disruption and impact when there's mitigating factors that may be in place where they don't have to suffer as much through this change of adaptability when it comes to technology. So it seems to me, while we have a cry for more frameworks, I'm really satisfied to some degree, not completely, with some of the pre-existing frameworks that are embedded in manifestos and white papers that are out there and that are readily available. I will throw this your way, Andrew. What are your thoughts on that?
There are about 36 separate AI ethics frameworks. You could go to the Berkman site and they've charted this, and they largely agree. And so what you're saying is true. We don't want a glistening golden benchmark on a hill that is beautiful, but that nobody uses. And so how do you deploy these things? It's back to people doing the work. You need to educate people in principles, give them frameworks, and give them checklists that they can go through like any other industry. Every other profession, let me qualify that slightly. Nearly every other profession, architecture, law, engineering, finance, even real estate, have ethics requirements that people are held to and can be kicked out of the industry if they don't observe, and are regularly educated on, so that there is no room for willful blindness. All of the idea that they didn't know has been removed. This is happening right now in areas like greenwashing. The way to sell it into corporations, quite frankly, what we found is, yes, there are people like us that are totally turned on by doing good things, and it gives us energy and feeling good for whatever reason that we were raised, or whatever education came into us. The majority of people in corporations who are doing the work that's funded need to be sold on the basis of risk. There is an increasing knowledge and consciousness in the advertising industry that there are severe risks associated with advertising now, leaking data and being sued for it, backlash from consumers for being insensitive. And I wanted to say something to you, Eli, too, which I think what you said was a wonderful point, which is consent, meaningful consent. A woman who's the chief responsibility at Universal McCann, Ariel Garcia, talks about the idea that there can be no durable relationships that aren't based on consent or are based on trickery. So those relationships won't last. They're temporary. So people that are interested in long-term relationships can't do that. Also, trust and ethics is what gives you license to innovate into new markets. Witness Facebook, who got turned down when they tried to go into currency a couple of years ago. You're no longer allowed to go into into new markets because people don't trust you. That becomes a tax. So you sell it in on risks to corporations that there are big costs associated and there are significant benefits associated in being an ethical company if you want to attract the best talent, have clients that want to work with trusted companies and steer clear and get ahead of the gavel. So those are kind of the arguments that we've seen. Also, like the final thing that I would say, a real situation. Like here are real workers. Most of people do want to do the right thing. They do have good instincts. They want to feel good and proud about what they're coming in to spend their time doing. And you see ads in ad magazines that say, come work for us. You don't have to feel slimy. Here's a situation of like how it could be implemented. One small anecdote. Havas, who's a partner of ours, where 800 people have raised their hand to take certification, ethics certification, just in advertising, which is the most popular non-mandatory course, which gives you a sense of like the hunger that people have if you can put it in their system. They have a client, Sanofi, drug manufacturer. Sanofi used to ask Havas to do things. Havas would push back on certain things. There was no clear understanding of what was ethical, so they'd send it up to a lawyer who became the bad person. Now both parties have taken the certification. All of their conversations start on the same basis, and it cuts out a lot of swirl. And so a lot of this is also what you were talking about. We're not trying to give people the hard prescriptions for what you do, but at least a set of principles so they can make reasoned decisions. And at least they're aware of it. It is an ingredient in their decision making, and it's a part of their workflow. That would be a great start to normalize this.
Thank you, Andrew, for sharing that. I'm sitting here thinking about the power of a thing that I learned a long time ago at my hacker dojo in Mountain View when I first came to Silicon Valley, living out of my car, building on a hacker spaces, making, coding, and developing. I learned a thing called media psychology, and the powerful persuasion therein of distributed information, and how media psychology, with the millions of dollars that go out for advertisement, can be able to help sway millions of consumers on a thing that they believe that they should have, but perhaps they shouldn't. Amie, I'm coming back to you. We talked about education. You raised a great point that in some ways, how are we able to teach where we're at when it comes to AI, when it comes to spatial computing, when it comes to the metaverse, when it comes to extending technologies? Is there a solution that you're seeing on the ground, Amie, about what we can do when it comes to accelerating education? And have we as technologists and builders of these innovations, have we done enough for guided mentorship from your lens?
Can I answer something that you asked earlier first?
Please.
Is that okay? One thing when you all were speaking, I was thinking like with the whole like framework that they're there, but there's no funding. What if the bigger AI companies had some type of, I don't know, like an ethical fund to put into or like a risk assessment or something to put into like money into to fund these frameworks. I mean, it's kind of like almost not exactly like insurance, but something like, something like that. And also, I mean, who's responsible for like generative AI when we get into that and it starts kind of developing on its own? I think it gets really gray then. And as far as education, I mean, I think it's getting more people involved and having more diverse, like people involved in the building process of it, so that AI is for everyone. And I've been looking into and I don't know if it would ever work or not, but AI like regulation, once people agree what regulation is, I mean, can that be monitored on the blockchain? Like programmed how like DAOs are, if this happens and that happens, then like C happens, like a consequence to it. I mean, I'm not sure, but I think it's worth looking into. But with education, I just think that's the way, is just getting it out there and getting more people involved in areas that they're, you don't see people involved in right now too, like, more diversity.
No doubt that the most prolific form of technology that's been built within the past 20 to 30 years is the power of communication. And it seems to me that we stand to benefit to have the opportunity to innovate the ways that we deliver information, because seeing this prolific rise of so many startups here in Silicon Valley in particular, I have been working from lab to market, lab to funding startups, and helping guide and mentor many for years now. And I've never seen this dramatic influx globally of startups that are arriving, that are mitigating certain steps that traditionally you just can't in order to even go to market, but they are, because AI is replacing the role of 10x personnel to be able to get these jobs done, and to have that be part of your product delivery and development is fascinating to see. On the investment side, investors are, I guess it's a high-class problem to have for them, but they're looking at cohorts of platforms that have such value and high adoption that they have a lot of options in which to choose from, and now they have to figure out where they spend their ultimately finite reserves of capital being invested in these platforms. But this lends to a concern as we see these platforms that are shooting up. We saw it during the applications evolution, didn't we? When the iPhone and the Android came out, and all of these startups became incredibly wealthy. Many of them became incredibly wealthy overnight, Claire. And we saw these platforms really excel. And we have to realize that they've been innovating and hiring and building, but there really hasn't been a ton of time for them to really lay down ethical framework, in which many of them, I hope, are reconsidering their whole ethical outlook when it comes to the frameworks that they do have installed. And not just a sense in the vertical of DEI, but a sense of how they operate and what they operate in for, and for whom, and they distribute out for. Claire, again, I put the reiterance in these external organizations who are doing yeoman's work to really help guide organizations when it comes to corporations. But is there a disconnect where it comes to policy and legislation in these external organizations? And is there a solution that you have in mind?
I've been thinking a whole lot about this, and there are the solutions that we want to be solutions, and I feel like that's some of what we've talked about. And I feel like that's definitely what you're touching on, in terms of there's a real body of people who have, a huge stake in this and really want this to be a functional technology. And so answering that, I think it's important to have a ton of stakeholders at the table as we develop this technology. Ethicists, technologists, people in government, people at think tanks, people at policy, people particularly from marginalized communities that are particularly sensitive due to the bias built in. But the truth of the matter is, I don't think we can have, these are great solutions, but we're not able to implement them. And we haven't really touched on regulation. Amie did a little bit, but I think we have to address that elephant in the room. And there are a couple ideas I have there. One is regulation is usually very, kind of lagging indicator. It's reactive. It's not proactive, and we're seeing that obviously with social media. I think now with social media as a lesson, people are starting to realize it needs to be more proactive. And I think, looking at these just dire warnings about the end of humanity that are coming out from tech leaders, they're aware of this problem. I was looking at OpenAI's site, and one of their policy directors had a quote that said something along the lines of, "There's still time to fix this," or "There's still time to mitigate this." And I think because of the capitalist imperative that was discussed earlier, it's a race to the bottom. We can tell it's a race to the bottom. People have to get the newest, tools out and integrate them, and that's how you win. And it's an imperative of capitalism. But people can see how dangerous this is. And I don't think AI should be measured by who can deploy it the most quickly. who can get it in front of the most people. I think there are a lot of other measures it needs to be judged by. And in order to do this, I really strongly think there should be a pause on deploying new technology. The genie's obviously out of the bottle. This technology is being used. But if the leaders of these biggest companies are coming out and saying, you know, there's still time, we can do this, they need to really be able to form an industry body, I think, led by government and led by governments around the world. And we see the EU already doing this. And Andrew, I know you touched on this, kind of an industry organization that I think really needs to be a hybrid with the governments. And, you know, there are all sorts of arguments against this. Other companies are going to run away with it. They're going to be left behind. That's why I think there needs to be a general consensus, and perhaps that will involve a certain measure of shame that these companies, you know, have to abide by, and the media should hold them accountable, and their own employees should hold them accountable. And there's, of course, the argument we repeatedly hear that China is going to eat our lunch if we take a pause. But the truth of the matter is China already has a number of regulations about this technology. The Chinese government does not want, hallucinatory AI let loose. They don't want AI to be undermining their, agenda. So China is actually heavily regulating this. And we see the technology that's being put out by American companies is actually contributing to AI development in other countries. Like Meta's Llama model was integrated into, I think, Baidu's model because it was superior to the Ernie bot that they initially put out. So, not only by us pausing will China not leapfrog us, but also we won't be able to share our dangerous tools with other potentially dangerous agents around the world. So, I think we can talk about these solutions, and I love the idea of getting all the stakeholders at the table, and there are a ton of things I believe in here, but I do believe these industry leaders who acknowledge the danger to humanity need to take a step back, and that government probably needs to push them to do that. But, I'm not just saying sign a 6-month letter, but, government needs to be involved, but there needs to be accountability.
Sure. And we value what you just expressed, Claire. And thank you for sharing that, Eli. I'm going to come to you. Then, Andrew, we're hopping over you in a second. But I have to bring up this consideration. And let's take it there. You brought up China. We're talking about, and of course, Xi Jinping. And we're talking about the alignment. There's an alignment consideration when we talk about AI. For those audience that are at home, some of us will know, or your workplace, some of us will know what the alignment problem is. And we ask ourselves, with this type of artificial intelligence that we have here now, these GPT or large language foundational models, with this type of AI, ultimately, as it begins to scale and progress, with some saying decidedly that we have reached AGI, some saying that we haven't, some saying that we're seeing glimmers of artificial general intelligence. I personally believe that we are seeing glimmers of artificial general intelligence. I do believe that, and I'm not alone in that sentiment. But here's the bigger point at hand. We talk about alignment. Will ultimately AI align with human values? But whose values? Vladimir Putin's? Hu Jintao? Xi Jinping? Kim Jong-il? So when we think about alignment of values, and we think about the accelerated fashion in which we see platforms that have already reached Linux when it comes to auto GPT, I would like to think that, sure, we can put a pause on it. But my big concern is now from a defensive posture, those hackers that are out here in Silicon Valley and elsewhere around the world, and fleets of them that are sitting in North Korea, they're not pausing when it comes to generative pre-trained transformers. And the reality is that we've taken science, rudimentary, because that's what technology is. This is science and applied science. We've taken science to be able to understand and unlock what we don't know about science. In other words, we haven't been this close to understanding the nature of physics, and we're getting rather close to that. And that, I believe, is what gives a certain amount of pause. The world says, oh gosh, they're going to create another nuclear weapon, another nuclear bomb. Listen, there's already enough nuclear arsenal. I have a bigger concern for which major country in this world creates a deterrent for nuclear weapons. that has the ability to be able to deter you from using this nuclear weapons, and if they're the only person holding it, especially with that war happening over in Ukraine and Russia. But Claire, your points were really strikingly made. Might we be able to find a balance? Eli, I have a question for you. When we talk about ethics, can AI be programmed with ethical principles, one? And if so, whose ethics should AI follow? And how can we assure a diverse representation?
Okay, I should have had my whiteboard ready for this. Yeah, I think the first part is the reality is a lot of our technology is a reflection of ourselves. And as Claire brought up, some of that reflection and review involves a bit of shame, and shame doesn't feel good. So we don't want to look at it that way. We want to blame the people using the technology. We want to blame the technology. And the truth of the matter is that this is something that predates AI. I remember, well, depending on how you're defining AI, because the example I'm going to refer to is when the Wii first came out and folks of certain skin tones were not being picked up by the camera, or camera detection for phones where they would say that somebody blink for folks with certain eye shapes. We've already had biases and errors happening within early stages of automation, AI, and just technology in general. And so I feel like the fact is we can try to program ethics into AI, but first we have to recognize what the technology is, what biases are already existing in it, and what we're building into it. Truly, we want to proliferate education to try to make these changes, but so many folks, and as Amie mentioned, so many vulnerable stakeholders are left out of this conversation for so long that there are just some things that have hit a certain level of, for those who are techno-literate, perceived like normalcy. It's expected that you know this level of technology, and so we're already leaving so many folks out of the conversation and then expecting to move forward. So to summarize it and to not ramble on too much longer,
You're good.
I think we can, but I think that we don't know how to yet because we haven't for so long.
Very interesting. It gives me a bit of pause. I'm going to open up to everyone just for a quick second. Is the biggest threat right now that we're looking at today, especially with this rather damning PDF journal that came out from the UN less than 24 hours ago, expressing with a focal point of misinformation, disinformation? Is that the biggest threat that we're looking at? I want a colloquial sense from all of you. Misinformation and disinformation, or is it something further? Claire, your mic.
Yeah, I wasn't expected to get called on. That is such a hard question. Oh my goodness. I mean, there are so many threats that are so dangerous, but yeah, I mean, speaking about the immediate of the moment, I mean, looking at what's happening already with political commercials and what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, and, you know, the kind of deep fakes that can be made and then propagated through this AI around the world. I don't know if I can definitively answer yes.
Sure.
Or no.
Sure. Amie, I'll jump to you real quick because you talked about something that I think is fascinating and relatability to the UN article where we're saying, okay, misinformation and different information, but we seem to not be able to educate in sending any kind of information out to be able to educate people on exactly what this technology is. And to keep in consideration, we're not even at 50% adoption yet globally when it comes to GPT, because some countries don't even have access to Google. That's a really big deal and a problem in this world for sure. And when I think about it, I'm sitting here saying, wow, what is the big problem? What is it that are we defining misinformation, disinformation, or a lack of education accessibility as the biggest obstacle? Go for it.
I think that's one of the biggest obstacles, but I'm not sure if it is the biggest obstacle. I mean, I think that we're building something. I think to me, the biggest obstacle is we're building something that we, like how you said, the science, and not knowing what we don't know. And what can that potentially do? I think it can be fascinating, or there's a lot of harm that could be there. And what is our like obsession with building something that's almost like to replace us, that's just like us, but more empowering? If it controls it would be in the internet, the global internet. So I mean, and that can learn faster and quicker. And I think that to me, that's the even larger concern that I have with that. And I don't think that you can stop it now, like to pause it. I mean, it's open source. There's so many people building. I mean, I don't understand how government would be able to stop people from continually evolving with AI, even if it's not the larger corporations, just people in general. There's like sites like, I know I look at the site futurepedia.io. There is, a month ago, there were maybe like 1,000 open source AI things on there. There's like 30,000 now, that fast, that people are just building. So, I mean, I don't know how you can control that at all.
It seems to me that there's a great big warning that's happening, and I feel like many of my fellow colleagues and technologists, we're missing it. And while I enjoy as much as anyone else a good Apple product that releases, I really do. Huge fan of Apple. I have a bigger concern with people like Timnit Giroux, who are one of the foremost experts in this world on AI. When you have people like Professor Hinton, who stepped down from Google to be able to help warn the world of what's coming down the pipeline, arguably because his own technology has played a significant role in helping define GPT. Ilya Sutskever, who was a student that's trained under Professor Hinton. For those at home who may not know who we're talking about, some say that he's the godfather of AI, and he steps down and says, we have a really big deal. When CEOs like Sundar Pichai on 60 Minutes, I'm not making this up, you can go find out for yourself, is asked in an interview, and he says, we're going to need the help of law enforcement. When people that are coming from OpenAI, IBM, and professors that are going to United States Congress and elsewhere in organizations like UNESCO and UN, and they're saying, hey, we have a really big deal, we're going to need the help of government, where government says, hey, wait, we're used to following and chasing you to be able to help keep you accountable, or so-called. Let me get this straight. You're coming to us, the government, because you're saying you need some help? What do you exactly are saying that you need help with? Now, some of my corporate friends say, well, it's just a ploy for them to be able to garner more regulation and be able to have more control and monopolizing the market. And that's the problem I have with people from corporations. They're always looking at it from a product decision. Maybe just stop to consider that we need to start looking at it from a humane decision. That's my little rant. I'm sticking to it, standing in that square. Andrew, what do you got? Your mic, sir.
Thank you. I just want to pick up on something that Amie said, and I think, Claire, you alluded to, which is, this. We've been talking about regulation and business, government and business as forces in shaping a better version of what we're talking about. So there is a model that does exist after the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, where there were subprime situation and everybody was lying to each other, which is familiar territory here. There was a organization called FINRA that was set up, and it is paid for by the banks, and it reports to the government, but it has the resources of the banks to monitor the banks, but it reports to government, and it's funded by certifications that people have to take in the ethics of finance. So there are models where this works. It's very hard for the FTC with 1,200 or so total people and only 50 lawyers governing advertising to have any weight or the ability to exercise regulation, to actually enforce regulation in the absence of industry participation. It's just not happening. Today, if you want to talk about disinformation, right today, 2/3 of all native advertising, which was a business that I was in, which declined into kind of content that was designed to look, ads that were designed to look like content and to trick people into reading them. The FTC has guidance on native advertising and advertorial kind of content. 2/3 of all ads that are circulated, or 2/3 of all native content today, doesn't meet those guidelines. So how helpful it is that to have the FTC saying that, to have those guidelines in place, to have them unenforced. So you do need some cooperative, aspect. I think that's what you were suggesting, and that maybe they could fund it. Maybe the people that are responsible for the harms have the responsibility to make sure their products are safe before they put them out on the marketplace. That's
How
all.
fascinating of a consideration when we think about that. And thank you, Andrew. And sure, Amie, I'm right there lock and step with you that perhaps it is time for companies and corporations, instead of being so competitive against one another, find middle ground to be able to help support one another when it comes to these new types of technologies, or emerging technologies, if you will, that are coming out. But Claire, I want to bring it back to you. And how can we assure the equitable distribution of AI's benefits and prevent it from further widening socioeconomic disparities?
Yeah, I have a lot of thought on this. It's, very difficult. I think it's very important for accessibility of this technology and training. In that way, I think the expansion of internet access, which I know Congress is working on things like that right now, but I think everyone should have access to high-speed internet. I believe that hardware should be made available, if only to students. Some of that has been done during the pandemic. I believe that should be sponsored by these technology companies. These AI companies should be putting money in toward this. And I saw someone in the comments, let's make sure they're not actually designing the policy, and I think like FINRA, for example, is a great instance where there is a community-wide organization that's funding it. And this money is going to certain things: broadband access, hardware, education, training, taught in school, taught in various other community organizations, after school programs. There should be grants for this to be taught across the board. So education, I believe, is integral. But I also believe, obviously, the AI itself that's being built needs to be radically overhauled and, auditable and reprogrammed. And I think fairness needs to be built into it as one of the core principles. So, and that's another, idea of explainable AI or great glass box AI. I think we need to understand, if not how these millions of decisions, are going into, these millions of inputs are going into a decision, at least kind of a weighing option. And I think the data sets themselves and the AI itself needs to be reassessed, and it needs to be auditable, and it needs to be constantly iterated upon to keep it clean and to keep it ethical, and to keep it non-biased. So I think those two things, from the starting point and then from the ending point, those things can come together and try and prevent additional harm. And again, that kind of comes into the idea of governance, and also, industry governance and government governance. And Andrew, you totally touched on that. I think there needs to be unification, because if all the leaders of these AI companies are coming out and saying it could kill us all, it could be the end of the world, like, they should really step up and band together and work together to prevent that from happening, And like you said, the alarmism, some people cynically think that it is to promote their products, but I think in a way it can be seen as good, because it's making the media pay attention, it's making people pay attention, and the government is so responsive when it comes to regulation. Hopefully this, even though it's, kind of fear-mongering, will provide an incentive for the government to really be proactive in taking all these steps.
Thank you for sharing that, Claire. We certainly really appreciate these remarks. Eli, I will throw this your way. How can we educate the general public about the ethical considerations of AI to ensure informed consent and participation?
Yeah, that is a huge one. That's a huge question. So first, I want to respond to the UN question, because I didn't get to respond to that one.
Of course.
You asked, the question was if misinformation is the greatest issue, and I feel like it is asterisk, because I feel like advancementism is actually our biggest issue. Advancementism is a term that I made while writing a paper about essentially something that everyone has brought up, a race to the bottom, this progression and pursuit of essentially what we can create, or basically the pursuit of what we can create without thinking about the repercussions of what it actually is, how we're implementing it, and why we're actually making that piece of technology. So I think that that's our biggest issue, is advancementism, because we're constantly pursuing this goal that's being projected out without thinking about or without facing the repercussions of it, and that aligns with misinformation. Now, going to your education question, I feel like that connects to the misinformation, because if we don't have a lot of ways to really teach people about the technology, misinformation is only going to perpetuate. As mentioned, many people don't have access to internet or high-speed internet. And if they do, the technology that they're interacting with is going to change that entire interface. I mean, I watched a wonderful video essay that discussed on how the internet UI in the US can be radically different from Japan because of the ways that certain websites are just built up. So you have this piece of technology, and then you have the technology that people are interfacing with, and then the access to that technology. So there's so many tiers to it that we can try our best to educate those within our community by recognizing people's levels of techno literacy, by recognizing the fact that not everybody is going to be able to access technology, by recognizing where people are coming from with technology. But there is already so much disenfranchisement that it feels like we should be recognizing and resolving that, while also trying to create means for educating those who are able to access technology as well.
And on that note, which is a strong note, that's a fine point expressed, we want to thank all of our panel members for ethical. That certainly went by fast, seemingly as AI is as well. We thank you all. We have much more to go. Audience, stick with us as we prepare to move forward to more fireside discussions and panels, and we only have a little bit of time to do it. Thank you, panel.
Thank you, Christopher.
And thank you for staying with us here at Ethical. We only have a little bit of time left to be able to explore and to express and help define, in a colloquial sense, globally, what we mean when we talk about ethics. Now it's time for our next guest, Jens Kull, who comes and joins us to be able to talk more about this insightful and important narrative. Audience, for you, those at home and our GatherVerse.live, we're very happy to see that you're still with us. We hope you're enjoying a cup of coffee, a cup of tea. And for us, the few that are hanging out on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and elsewhere where we distribute out to, we say hello and we greet you. And for those that are just now arriving, it's already been rather insightful and a lot that's been expressed. And we have a little bit more to be able to cover, a bunch of ground to gain, and we only have a little bit of time to do it. Jens, we welcome you. Greetings.
Greetings, Christopher. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, my friend. Who are you and why are you here today, Jens?
Well, I'm a human being that is probably suffering the whole questions that are rising the same way as everybody that has been on this panel before. And the nightmares are here, you know, the fears are here. the problems that were arising are just really going so deep that sometimes I feel I freeze with all this really heavy weight that we have to solve. It's a really heavy lift. We have to find solutions for, you know. So I've been working in the commercial world, doing visual effects. I've probably 1,000 commercials under my belt, post-producing those. But I come from fine arts, and I've always had a deep interest in how to make experiences in storytelling more immersive, and how having actually a joyful moment by telling stories, and in service to what? In service to life, you know, not too much in service of having certain circles or certain interests grow without humanity really going forward in a direction where we are more harmonious with each other, because that's the ultimate goal. I think that we are here to balance the gift of life, and having all-inclusive perceptions of what life is all about. And technology now is taking a huge leap in order to help us with it, or in order going down the abyss. So we are constantly on the abyss now. That's my perception. And I have the notion that the responsibility that we have to have with ourselves now is really becoming imminent. So I'm here to learn and to understand all these different points of views and biases. Where am I biased, and how can I possibly dissolve the bias, and just really work into a direction where we address things through shadow work. I have no other words to say, because there is a huge shadow imminent here.
When we think about our foundations and nonprofit organizations in the world that really help guide this light, to really, show forth a better way for us to approach technology. Can you speak to some of this when we talk about this evolution of innovation? And do we have enough nonprofit organizations and foundations that are helping to bring us to a better understanding on exactly what we're innovating and for why we innovate what we're innovating?
Well, I think there are definitely enough nonprofit foundations around that are hugely successful in actually understanding what we have to do or where we have to go. And I see a problem that when it comes to funding, when it comes to money, when it comes to this energy, I'm having trouble with understanding, where in order to what extent are we actually doing work? Where is actually this whole development going in order to what does it sustain? Does it sustain humanity, or does it sustain just a growth or a profit thinking? I have a huge probably bias myself, but I have the notion that the people that have the money are not deploying it in the way it should be deployed in this moment of where we have to take care of our planet, for instance, or where we have to take a deep dive into how we should nourish ourselves, how we should what we should let in. And that's I see that the technology is rising, and there are new suggestions here how to go about consumption, but I don't think that this is really in the interest of big corporations, and since they are in power of this economical wealth, they are not willing probably to just deploy it, or they always see the profit as the first thing they want to cover. And I think we have to completely go another way. We have to create omni-win situations all over. And that's why I purely want to collaborate with foundations, or let's say non-profit organizations that have a very clear vision on how they go about a profit, which is non-profit. It should be an omni-win situation that's coming up. And I see just a huge hurdle there, and I've struggled with that myself, so I see that we are mirroring a very deep human dilemma here.
We are, aren't we? When I think about the nonprofit organizations and foundations that I personally know that struggle with gaining resources and finances to be able to implement goodwill and to be able to implement and really put to work frameworks that could be of great use for, rather thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not even only tens of thousands of people. And there's so many obstacles for nonprofit organizations, one, to even stay afloat, to form, and there's so many obstacles for them to be able to receive capital. And when they do receive capital to distribute goodness towards others, it's so finite, the amount that they have. It does something, but it doesn't do enough. I get the sense that wouldn't it be great for us to really reimagine and rethink the way we look at the role of the nonprofit and external organizations that really are formulated for good and that aren't under the banner of or subsequent to heavy manipulation and corruption?
Absolutely. I think that imagination is probably our most powerful tool as human beings. So we can co-imagine and co-create a world where trust is really the currency. Trust and I have the notion that we cannot implement that from a big spectrum first. We have to go with friends and trustees and actually grow from a very small cell first of trustees and ping pong these ideas around. And I have the notion that we have all the technological power in hand. We have computers in our hands now, and it really depends how we use these computers in order to communicate with each other. And we don't have to be subversive. We just have to trust each other to push this forward in a direction where the competition is redefined. We should probably stop competing on some levels where it just nourishes distrust and actually the decline of our planet. So we should take care of each other in a deeper way, and helping to organize in a way that the data that we have available, we can explore with it and have it actually going in a direction where we digest it differently, so we don't do this in a fast food or let's say consumerist position. We could just really revolutionizing the way how we take in information and how we bounce it back and forth and how we get active on it.
For the audience that are with us, these moments are short-lived. Jens, we enjoyed being able to have you with us. I hope that each of you would take time to reach out to Jens Kull, who's really doing yeoman's work, dedicated work towards working with nonprofit organizations, foundations, in the creative community, doing incredible things. And Jens, we will have you on very sooner rather than later. Thank you, my dear friend.
Thank you very much, Christopher.
For coming up next, we have Isabel de Peuter-Rutten, who is an extraordinary figure in the world of technology with a guiding heart in the European ecosystem. She's also our GatherVerse European Director. She is an ally a friend, a leader. She's coming to share experiences with us about her recent stay and visit with Parliament in Europe, but also things that she's been working on in the different framework lens. Isabel, we welcome you.
Thank you. Hi, great to see you, and well, thank you for having me.
We're very happy to have you, and thank you for spending some precious time with us here at GatherVerse Ethical. And I must say that of our 8 standards, it was actually Isabel that helped come up with the framework of how we at GatherVerse look at our 8th standard, which is our recently added one, with the need for adding ethics. And she was so imbued and inspiring to share with us the reason why this standard means so much amongst the other 7 standards that we had. And we felt an immediate urgency to add it. Isabel, what are we looking at right now with this whole world of ethics in this conversation? I know that you've been with us the whole time. Give us what you're looking at when it comes to ethical development outlook. And will you please share with us some of your insight from your visit with Parliament?
So ethics in the first place, it's like Avi told earlier, it's how you look at it. And that's different for everybody, for each culture and so on. So I went for a small search earlier on what, if you put it in Google, what is ethics, what comes up. And I was kind of happy to see some interesting feedback. Whereas they say, so ethics refers to the guidelines for conduct that address questions of morality. Value provides the principles and ideals upon which judgment is made of what is more important. That's the general information. But then something other came up, and that was really my cup of tea. It's what you do when no one is looking. And then I have to think back of a conversation we had where in the past, where we were talking about it's not because everybody is doing it that it's right, and it's not because only one person is doing it that it's wrong. And therefore, I think ethics is a basic need in our society, in our world, because there are so many people out there with so many cultures, so many differences, but also so many things in common. And ethics is what keeps us together in communicating, in being with one another. And as you know, for me, technology is something I'm passionate about, but it has to stay at service of humankind. And how do you make sure that something stays at service of humankind is making sure that it responds to some basic norms, values, ethics, if you want. And that is exactly what we also discussed at the European Parliament, where I was invited end of April to discuss what's going on at this point in time in terms of emerging tech, but also in terms of ethical approach about these technologies. Which I do applaud, is that at one side we often have the idea with institutions, governments, and so on, that they like lost contact with the real world. And in that sense, I think it was really good that they are always open to listen and be open to hear others' opinions. So we also had Reana Schweniger-Lager from DG Connect, which is like big boss for our division in Europe, and Joanne from the XR Association, and also someone from a German company, really cool guy, 23 years old, just to give you an idea. And the thing is that they are aware of those new technologies, but they don't always see the extent where it brings us. And in terms of ethics, that is crucial, because what for them seems solved through legislation, legal frameworks, and so on, which we do need, is not always, they don't always see the outcome of it, whereas we are like in the middle of it from within our industry, so we are able to report, discuss on that. So it was a very interesting conversation according to Chatham House rules, which makes that we are able to speak freely during the discussion. But that also means that most of the discussion remains inside. So I can't really speak up about all of the details that we discussed. But it is quite reassuring that not only people from within the parliament, but also policymakers and everyone did attend, and we are continuing to follow up on the conversation. So it's an ongoing job, an ongoing item that remains necessary.
We thank you for sharing that. We care so much for the hard work that you do, especially with the GatherVerse European community, and you work with so many different other communities such as Euroimmersive and other platforms that we do hold a common heart with and a common bond with. I know that there's been a lot of talk of what's happened within the last 24 hours of the UN coming out with this information about misinformation and disinformation. We know that UNESCO World Heritage, when I had the opportunity to spend some time in Europe and hear some things that they had to share, and we know that there's a lot happening ethically when we think about the European ecosystem, and some even advocate for the working world, if you will, to look to Europe for the ethical guidelines. Whether that remains true or not, I don't know, but why do you think that's expressed? And you're in Belgium, a place where they really do chop that type of wood where it comes to frameworks and laws and legislation and policy. Why do you think that is? And can we look at Europe as a guiding point when it comes to the new shores that we're ascending on?
I think a lot has to do with one side, history. It grew historically in terms of Europe, the old continent. Let's take it from there. Whereas it's a big difference in culture, and we see that not only in terms of investments, but also in approaching new technologies, whereas Europe is more, they will more go to frameworks, legislation, and so on, whereas the US is known for just embracing new things and loving the adventure and so on. So I think we can look at everybody in the world in the end, and I think we should take best parts out of all of them, because it's, how should I say, there's not just one size fits all, and it's not that one person has the truth in his hands. So all depends on the use case, and yes, we can learn from each other, whereas there are a lot of countries or governments that are quite dispersed, especially in Europe. We have the European Union, but I keep saying this, some people might say, there she is, there she goes again. The European Union is only 27 countries out of 51 continental European countries, which is half of the continent that they represent. So if we look at Europe, if we talk about European Union, we seem more cohesive than we are in reality, unfortunately. So if we look at, for instance, new legislations and frameworks in Europe, for instance, it's not like in the US that you have one common law that might be applicable for the entire continent, the northern part at least. But in Europe, it's for the countries within the European Union. If a legislation in the country itself is more strict than the European directive, then it's the legislation in that country that is applicable. If not, it's the European legislation. So as a startup, for instance, if you want to start doing business, you have to find out, oh, is the European legislation in order, or is the local legislation in order? And if it's more strict, then how much more strict is it? So it's not black and white. So it's really something we have to take, topic by topic and project by project. But that doesn't mean that the intention of collaborating is not there. So the intention is there, but due to historically how everything evolved, it's quite complex. So unfortunately, we don't have a black and white answer. That's just how it is, which means that, yes, we can look at Europe for frameworks, but we shouldn't let ourselves define by those frameworks either. I think that is a very important one. And it's not only Europe. I mean, there are other continents in this world, and they all have their good features and bad features. That's just how the world goes, with good people and bad people, as always. But I think, yeah, we can learn from each other and take the best with us for going forward.
The last quick question, and thank you so much, Isabel. We're so grateful for your expressions. When it comes to ethics, why was this so important for us to adopt this when it comes to GatherVerse? And why is this so important for us to distribute these type of events to the world and the communities of technology and more?
I think first and foremost, what is important is we have all the 8 GatherVerse standards, 7 up before, and we were talking about accessibility. We're talking about education and so on. All these standards are more than valid and important, but what is like linking us together is the ethical part. And with ethics, we can have a better understanding of, for instance, accessibility, education, and so forth and so on, with respect for one another, in terms of culture, in terms of belief, or and so forth and so on, because the technology is just a mean. But in the end, we're talking about society of all these people, and it's them that matter. And without people, there is no technology, and technology without people wouldn't be useful either. So I think ethics is what links us and what brings us together, what makes us stick together, the glue.
And certainly something that helps us stick together. Heart-powered, always heartfelt audience. I hope that you would go follow Isabel de Putten-Rutten and all the different organizations that she works for, works with, represents, leadership. She's doing a whole lot in Europe, and she can't do it alone. She certainly is valued by the GatherVerse community wholeheartedly, and we always thank you for your time and your leadership, Isabel, along with our other leaders that are part of the GatherVerse ecosystem. You're definitely a value add to our community. And if you didn't know, we hope you know.
Thank you so much. And we wouldn't be here without you either. So don't forget that part.
Well,
thank you all.
Take care, my dear friend. See you.
See you later.
Up next, we have a roundtable discussion where we talk about AI for the public good and ethical considerations in community safety and privacy. It's our last session that's coming up for ethical. Share this. Take the link and find somebody to watch this. You're not going to want to miss this roundtable discussion. We'll be back in just a few. And greetings all, and greetings everyone to the audience that's with us today at GatherVerse.live, which we see that you thankfully are still staying around. Panelists, we'd ask that you would mute your mics at the moment. We're thankful for all of you that have decided to stay with us a little longer, to stay with us for this hour of expression, to really lean in and deep dive on this panel discussion for AI for the public good and ethical consideration, community, safety, and privacy. This is a discussion and a talk where we're about to lean in and really convey to the world and to the masses why we get together and have these type of events. Each person on this panel has been handpicked and selected based on wanting to express and amplify their voices. Some have returned with us and have been with us with GatherVerse in times past. We value each of you. We want you to know this is a platform for also being able to feel free of open expression and come as you are, an audience for our YouTube gang that's there. When we talk about AI for the public good, what does that mean to you? And as we move forward, we have Emily Wright, who joins us from It'll Be All Right. We have Salman Alawi, founder and CEO of metadesigners.co, David Benjamin, founder of Web4 Foundation, of Presence AI, Lena Joshi, who comes to us from South Asia, Drew Falkman, founder of Friends.place, Ruth Diaz, founder of Vortex XR, an explorer of regenerative art in a fascinating way, and Aska Lida Lindahl is a great friend of GatherVerse and a valued member of our community. Shall we begin? Drew, we talk about design, we talk about development, but how can the design and application of AI be governed to ensure ethical considerations are at the forefront and not an afterthought of what we're building?
Yeah, that's a great question. Having worked like 20 years in product management, I've seen sort of how things were done with social media in particular, where people didn't think through the ramifications of these applications they were designing. They didn't think through what could happen. What happens if conflict brings more engagement and we're just incentivizing engagement? Then you get more conflict. And look at the world, look how polarized things are. And that's 100% because product managers, when they were designing products, were emphasizing those things. And I think this kind of thing is going to be very important in the world of AI when product managers and designers are putting together experiences around AI. They need to make sure that they're thinking through the ramifications. And look, I'm in Web3. I have been for the last couple of years, and the concept of self-regulation is great in the abstract, but all it takes is one SBF. That's all it takes, one bad player to really mess things up. And so, I think it's going to be important that we police one another a bit socially. And I think it's going to be important at some point to have regulation so long as it doesn't stifle innovation.
I agree. And Ruth, we're going to immediately hard end, and we're getting ready to speed the cadence to the tempo of this because we have a lot of ground to cover. You've been doing fascinating things when it comes to regenerative AI. We must ask, what role can AI play in creating sustainable and regenerative solutions to pressing societal challenges themselves, Ruth?
One of the things I've observed in immersive technology is that as things speed up and we have more access to people all over the world who aren't like us, we have the potential to learn from them and grow empathy, but we also have the potential to objectify them and make them cartoon figures in our mind. AI can be something we objectify also, and we want to use, but not necessarily understand where it's coming from and how to see our own humanity in the mirror of AI, if that's possible. So some of my own explorations with the Mid-Journey AI has given me a lot of new perspectives just by asking questions directly to it. I believe we can learn about ourselves through these tools, and believing that they're going to separate us and cause harm will make that more likely.
Indeed. And so, Emily, when we talk about AI for the public good, I know that you've been judiciously working on different frameworks when it comes to bias, unbiased, and looking at a different lens. Share with us from what you've been looking about and what you've been working about when it comes to ethical considerations in safety and privacy, and how should we be looking at AI right now?
That actually reminds me of a conversation I had with Drew and Ruth the other day, and we were kind of talking about this and talking about the potential that we have with AI. Like for me, I'm Gen Z, so this is a very important conversation topic for me because this is obviously the framework for my entire generation and for the future of our species. And we were discussing the rate of our evolution and the rate at which we're evolving compared to the rate at which our technology and our artificial intelligences are evolving. And there's kind of this consensus that our AIs are evolving faster than us. So there's this fear that it's going to overtake us, you know, and what will that look like for us and what will that mean? And we were discussing that, well, maybe this is something we can use to our advantage. You know, if we know that our AIs are going to surpass us at some point when it comes to the evolution of our consciousness, how can that help us? You know, if we're the ones setting the framework for our AIs and setting ourselves up for the future, how can we use that to our advantage? And how can we use our AIs to, you know, teach us about ethics and to learn more about ourselves? Because obviously our technology is a reflection of us. So let's make it a reflection of our greatest potential. And it's really cool talking to, you know, Ruth and stuff about some of the things that you're working on. And it really talks to that. And like, well, let's use consciously for our advantage.
Indeed. David, I have a real concern when I think about AI for the public good. And when I think about this UN article that came out about misinformation, disinformation, what's the bigger threat that we're looking at when it comes to AI for public good presently? Your mic, sir.
Right. Well, in terms of AI for the public good, I think that the biggest threat really in the next several years is that for us to have a huge glut of information that is artificially generated, perhaps by autonomous agents, but then in addition to that which is being created by the AI, but also content that's being created by humans who are trying to get favor from the algorithms. So they're essentially crafting their content to meet the needs of what the AI is amplifying. So what we'll see is this huge data flywheel of content that really is being directed by the AI. And where is that going to go? I think there's going to be a lot of misinformation and disinformation. Obviously, that's a huge concern, and there's going to be a lot of clickbait, and there's going to be a lot of reinforcement of the things that we're already seeing in social media that are not healthy for people, like the need to use beauty filters and the need to talk about certain things and to adhere to specific narratives or trends to be seen, to get reach.
Indeed. We'll come back to that. You just touched on something that's very, very profound in terms of the filter. Lena, we're bringing it back to you, or we're bringing it to you rather, as we increasingly integrate AI systems into our communities. No doubt we have plenty of communities in our South Asian ecosystems that are filled with technologists throughout. When we talk about integrating AI into the community itself, my concern is what are some of the ethical considerations that we should keep in mind as we continue and as we grow into this narrative of AI integration?
I think key ethical considerations when integrating AI systems include fairness, accountability, transparency, and societal impact. Fairness involves ensuring that AI systems do not discriminate against certain groups or perpetuate existing biases. And accountability entails establishing mechanisms to assign responsibility for the actions and decisions made by AI systems. And transparency involves making AI processes and algorithms explainable and evaluating the potential consequences of AI systems on individuals, communities, and broader society, considering factors such as job displacement and societal inequality and human rights.
Indeed. And thank you for sharing that, Lena. And Salman, I know this is a really big deal for you. It feels like a big part too of what we concluded in when you joined us for Wellverse, and we talk about wellness of people. And Aleda, we're getting ready to jump to you as well on this same subject, because there is a striking intersect between public good, because how are we quantifying good? What is good, audience? When you think about AI for public good, for our YouTube chat people, put in there, what is AI for public good? How are we quantifying good? Is it good for you? Because good for one may not be good for all. It may be very subjective on how we look at this definition of good. So do we need to take this a little bit step further in defining good and how we measure good? Is it ethically good? Is it good in terms of equitable, accessible good? So when we look at that, what does that mean? But Salman, we'll put a pin in my thoughts on that. We want to hop over to your thoughts, to your cognition, and how you're interpreting what you're seeing when it comes to AI for public good.
All right, that is a wonderful question, Christopher. In terms of defining good, we're talking a lot about equality in the world, but we're not talking much about equity, right? We want everyone to be equal within their own circumstances. And the way that AI works and the way that mass products work is they opt for a good and they move for it without regarding the public good or the majority's good, because you've got a lot of different sectors of people, a lot of different pillars to look at. And when you're mass marketing, when you're creating a product for the mass, that is often overlooked. And AI itself is taking a very scary path, because if we know humans enough, we know that they tend to be manipulative, they tend to lie a lot, they tend to, do a lot of things that just aren't in the best benefit of the general public. And if we know AI enough, we know that data is what it learns from, and it gets its data basically from humans and what humans have created and what history has put in front of it. So I hope I answered the question there.
You did. And then later, we're hopping right over to you. When we talk about AI for public good, we talk about the angst, and Ruth hold a pin in that, because we're going to leap right over to you. We talk about angst, we talk about depression, we talk about rejection, we talk about really an end to nowhere for so many people that have been in a workplace with these promise of really strong job career, only to be found that they're being disrupted by innovation themselves. And so when we think about this psychologically, the ideas and the considerations for public good and moving forward, how do we take this with all the warnings that are happening and all the impact and the disruption? How do we walk forward with better steps?
So perspective is everything. Conscious awareness, right, is huge. I speak on that topic quite often, and the importance around conscious awareness. It's not until we are consciously aware that we can make new choices and new decisions. So I myself often speculate, is it the fact that we just haven't had the right technology before now? We haven't had the resources that we have had, because now we understand things about our own physical body and our own human brain that we didn't even know existed before. So if we really start to step up our own game, to me, this is an awakening, could be a very positive thing. Disruptors don't have to be negative. So if anything, this should start to bring people back into a state of awareness again, self-awareness, right? Self-assessment, to where we really have to start paying attention. And really, the biggest thing about our attention is our choices, because our algorithms are impacted by our choices and our decisions. So I also look at this from the aspect of we already have to police ourselves on the internet. There's already people using it who are disruptive or manipulative. I heard somebody say, you know, those are things that are out there. We already have to monitor what websites we go to in order to gather data or information or education. Those are things that if you aren't doing it, you should be privy that you should do it. The key is that this is going to be a great resource for the people who really are learning how to wield the power and the capability of it, and those who are moving swift and who are moving fast. And conscious awareness has to be a key component to every last aspect of it. And I'll give you an example here. Like, why are we going to run out? Like, let's look at this like it's our opportunity to create the humanity that we would want globally. Now, if we look at it from that perspective, we could build and design something very different if we're conscious and we wake up and we start using our brain to more of its full capacity. We can develop a whole new future, perhaps within the confinement of the new AI resources and the new, for lack of a better term, I think it's going to become like a new dimension, right? Once it really takes off and the fire really lights with the VR and the AR and all of that, which is underway, it's not something that we can run away from. This is something I think we need to step in and we need to take ownership in, and we need to wake up and become conscious.
Sure. Ruth, and thank you, Leda. Ruth, let's leap on over. We talk about safety, public safety, the approach to AI. Some of us have never interacted with it consciously, directly for the first time until now. How do we use this as a tool, as a value add, as instead of a fear?
Yeah, I mean, I think that fear is healthy. So I have a background in clinical psychology. Fear tells us when we're at the edge of something, and to be aware and be conscious. And I believe that the more we feed our fear into this AI experience that we are all engaging in, the more fear we're going to get back, if we think about it like a mirror. The word manipulation has been brought up a few times, and this is just a little bite for everybody to think about. That word got untangled for me by a professor who basically explained it as manipulation is when I'm using the wrong tool to get my needs met. That's all it is. I'm using the wrong tool to get my needs met. So if we think of AI as a tool, then people are getting their needs met sometimes with the wrong tool. And what does that say about the tools they need? And how do we grow safety around like funneling those people into education and resources and support to create better AI and to create AI that is for human good? So safety is more than ever before, I believe, a co-created consciousness and experience of uplifting and centering marginalized voices and learning how to empathize deeply with ourselves and each other so that we can catch those moments where the wrong tools are being used to connect us together and to ourselves.
And so the opportunity for us to be able to develop a better humanity for human betterment moving forward will constitute us to be able to create and form organizations and startup culture to feed. As fans of startup culture and people that care for startup culture, your mic, sir, when we think about startup culture and the approach therein, is this a good time for people to be able to build a startup using these present emerging tools to move forward and to develop their own platforms as opposed to being able to try to deter and change other people's platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that these emerging technologies now give us a new set of tools that will allow us to create environments that have the types of characteristics that we want. So we want safe environments. We want environments with data sovereignty. We want privacy. We want fair value exchange. We want to know when we're dealing with a human versus AI autonomous agent. So with the new technologies, Metaverse is one avenue. I'm also working on one called the MetaWeb, which is seeking to change how we look at the web. Right now, we see the web really as this flat thing that's on a two-dimensional screen, but the internet has possibility for limitless layers, and we can choose to build a layer over the web, and this could be accessible with a browser extension or SDKs or mobile apps, etc., web apps. You can essentially layer information on top of the web, and when you think of any one of these layers as a new environment, we can now define, what are the ways that we want it to work? Okay, well, AIs have to get authorization to even come into the layer, or this is the same for the metaverse in a way. To come into this specific virtual world, an AI will, if we're going to do this, of course, we're going to force the AI to prove that they should be there. Then we're going to actually have to make humans prove that they're human, right? Because otherwise we're not going to know what's an AI or not. So I'm really interested in the work that's being done by Fractal, by WorldCoin, by some other proof of humanity startups that will allow us to know that whoever we're dealing with is actually a unique human. And if that's the case, then we know that an entity that's not a unique human is a bot. And those bots need to have authorization to go into this virtual world or to participate in this layer over the web. It really gives us now an opportunity to define the types of environments that we want.
I'm glad that you shared that, because it gives great pause and great consideration for our new startup cycle when it comes to lab to funding and lab to market with startups themselves, and more startups. And listen, audience, this is really important. Take note that more startups are using AI more than ever before to be able to help them develop a product. But here's the consideration. If we're expecting, Drew, and our product delivery teams, be it public or private sector, that's going widespread, distributed out to the mass consumption, if we're expecting when the product delivery to be able to adhere to ethical considerations, but that product delivery is now AI itself, what does this translate ultimately into the products that are being developed in innovation? In other words, we have these individuals that are here that are thought to be human until they're not. And we're sitting here saying that we need ethical considerations for AI, but AI is replacing these humans. Who's governing what ethically?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. We're using, it's amazing what you can do already. And this is, really this like generative AI aspect is pretty nascent, and it's crazy what I can do with ChatGPT in terms of just saying, hey, can you build something that will do this, and it will give me step-by-step instructions and the code to build it. And that's going to happen more and more. And I think the one thing we all have to remember is that ultimately AI is just a layer on top of data. AI is only as good as the data that you feed to it. Even generative AI, it's using the data that's been created in the past to create something new. And so how we train these models and what we train them on makes a huge difference. So I think that's going to be something we consider a lot in the future is, how are we training these models, and how are these models being applied and correcting them before it gets too late? But yeah, it's and the other thing to remember is we can use AI to regulate AI. And that seems counterintuitive, but again, it's just data. So we can look at what's generated by AI, and we can use that as data and start being able to identify what AI is. We can start doing things to determine when things are coming, out of the ethical realm. And I think, all these developments are going to be critical in, making sure that we're creating something that's good for humankind.
I really appreciate that sentiment. I sit here and think about these large language foundational models being so widespread and horizontal, Emily. When I think about these type of generative pre-trained transformers that have ascended and that have really met humanity at its front, especially at adoption rates of 100 million users in less than 2 months. When we look at just GPT alone, and certainly it's not a single variable equation of what's being adopted out there when it comes to AI. But I also look forward to the day very soon where I believe, Drew, but Emily, we're coming to you, that when we start to look at the vertical focus of these large language foundational models, wellness GPT, education GPT, psychological GPT, accessibility GPT, where we actually get the practitioners who have been doing the work for years, some for decades, where we when we situate them in a situation where we can bring them into a centralized environment to be able to contribute their human intelligentsia that will be applicable and referenced with reliable and good information and attributed by them that actually have been willing to contribute their data of experience to these platforms that are being developed. To me, that seems more sure and reliable. So when we think about bias GPT, when we think about safety and privacy, Emily, with the work that you have been working on now under this subject, what are your thoughts on this, and what are you seeing?
That's a great question, and it's interesting. As you were explaining all of that, I was thinking about Star Trek, and I was thinking about the Doctor, the hologram in Star Trek Voyager, and he is basically the culmination of so much medical data and so many experiences from doctors and professionals throughout history. But he's a doctor and it works and everyone recognizes his value. And I think that it makes sense that this could be the next progression of the organization of our information. And for me, I think that when it comes to youth in particularly and looking to the future, we need to be discussing not necessarily just our access to information, but our relationship to information. And I think that should be our focus more so. You know, as students, we spend so much time just memorizing information that we can look up, you know? And I think that now especially as AI is starting to transform so rapidly and transform our lives so rapidly, and therefore our relationships, we should be focusing more on our relationships to these tools. And how can we use these tools? How can we share information? How do we access information? Rather than focusing on the information itself. Because knowledge is exponential. You know, if we're constantly just trying to limit our knowledge to what we can hold in our brains at one time, that's not necessarily going to help us fulfill our potential. So I'm very excited to see how this goes. And I think it comes back to, again, what Drew said, that it's all about what we provide. We provide the framework, we provide the data, we provide the baseline. And if we can provide an ethically sound baseline, then our AI can enhance that exponentially.
Indeed. Thank you, Emily, for sharing. Lena, I'm going to jump over to you because I believe that we are starting to see, and I'd like to see more organizations that are specifically dedicated to upholding these ethical standards, and especially when we start talking about inclusive culture and women leadership, communities of color, and just all around having ways for us to be able to build better humanely. With that said, what would encouragement that you would give to these organizations and those that are sitting here listening with us today at GatherVerse Ethical? What would you tell them that should be at the forefront of what they can actually build on and enhance to make better for their culture and for general society? Nina?
Yeah. So I think AI can contribute to a more inclusive and equitable society by addressing bias and discrimination, and it can promote accessibility and ensure equal opportunities. And to leverage its potential, we need diverse and representative data sets to train AI models. Uh, and I think AI can help improve access to education, climate information, healthcare, and other essential services, bridging gaps and empowering marginalized communities. So, for example, I'd like to share what currently we're doing. So, I'm currently working on an AI tool which can translate climate documents into different languages to make climate information more accessible. And not only that, but I want to make sure that we provide resources and opportunities to young girls, especially from Gen Z, so that they can be advocates for climate change in particular.
I think that's brilliant. Organizations, for those that are advocating for better use of AI, try using AI. You know, I find it very interesting. I'll let this in. I talked to an attorney friend of mine just the other day. He's been expressing about the need for high regulation when it comes to AI and hasn't spent a single day using ChatGPT ever. And I just came to find that out. And the reality is we can't call for regulations if we don't understand what we're regulating. We need to have a sense of what this technology is, and we need to adopt it. We can't 100% abstain. We need to use it. So we don't want to take such a firm stance as saying that I'll never use AI, because I don't think it serves the best interest of your platform, and I don't think it serves the best interest of the people who you're wanting to benefit by regulating and being able to make sure that we put in safeguards. So we need to get familiar with the tech. For those that are listening out here who may be abstaining from using it, especially within the corporate and the public and private sector, let your people use these technologies and tools. And in education, teachers, you're not going to be able to stop your students from using it. And as it was quoted a few weeks ago from a friend, Kate, and said, listen, worried about an education about your students actually using AI to be able to defeat your test will build a better test. So with that said, Salman, I know that you have very apprehensions when it comes to this technology, because I know it comes from a place of common care. How should we be approaching this? If not sensibly, how should we be approaching AI for the first time in our lives as a whole?
Well, that is a wonder.
Did we lose you, Salman? Perhaps Elon Musk will get him some Starlink. We'll come back to you. Aleda, when we talk about approaching this with an opportunity for humane considerations and gain, when it comes to artificial intelligence, when it comes to large language foundational models, to approach it sensibly, humanely, what does that look like from your lens?
Yeah, so a couple of different things come to mind. One is I want to point out that I feel like, you know, in the business world, one of the things that was always kind of monitored a bit here on the material plane is our monopolization, a monopoly of things. I don't feel like the monopoly was really paid attention to in the internet realm of things. And so I feel like there's been mass players on our field, and this is an opportunity for all of humanity to basically jump in and build and design, really for the first time, without a whole lot of monitoring and regulation yet. And I think that what's really going to be surprising is, so I tell people, it's like we watch TV, right? And when you pay attention to the programming, it looks like we're all out there slaughtering each other, but that's not really the case. Like we walk out our door, most people are helping each other, right? And so it's kind of like, this is our opportunity to rise to the occasion, to be the builders, to be the designers, to pay attention to the data. To your point, Christopher, we need to be responsible about where we're collecting the information from and who we're sourcing things from, just like we always have. But it's an opportunity to break out of boxes, if you will, for lack of a better term, and programming that we've had in the past, and really be able to see a much brighter future and build and design a much brighter future. Because if we can develop it in there, we should be able to replicate it out here. That's what's really exciting to me about it.
When I think about organizations, Emily, such as music platforms, I'll say, without naming any particular names, when I think about platforms that distribute consumption value that we enjoy, whether it's entertainment or be it music or arts, and when I think about this intersection of liberal arts and technology, and I think about these interactions that we have with it, and they're increasingly becoming more sophisticated, and there is a certain amount of bias that's already present. Now, let's compound that and add that to 10x fold, if you will, if not 50 fold, when it comes to our considerations of what we consume psychologically and mindfully. When we think about where companies are headed, where they're already at when it comes to implicit, explicit bias, is there an opportunity for them to take advantage of these emerging technologies to right that wrong, to make it better, to make it more applicable and more fair use of practice and generally healthy for our consumption?
Yeah, I mean, there is obviously a lot we can work on when it comes to our media, and it's nice to see a greater diversity of stories being shared. And I think that's really what it's about. It's about the stories that we have and sharing our stories and making sure that we see ourselves represented on the screen. Seeing ourselves represented online is really important. Like, I'm polyamorous pansexual, and I don't think I've ever seen a polyamorous pansexual person in a movie. And that's an interesting experience. When it comes to like the algorithms and recommendation software and how that works with, our media and our music, there's this added layer of bias there, where you have, the behind the scenes biases that come with the production of the stories, the production of the media, who gets to choose what stories are shared. And then you have the choices that come into deciding, well, who gets to stream this story, and then who that is accessing the streams gets to watch it, which users then get access to those stories. So there's loads of different layers and lots of filtering in that. It's kind of nice to see more companies becoming aware of that and the importance of DEI and bringing that into their policies. But it all comes down to the hiring and the access to education and resources so that everybody is able to present their stories. AI is kind of one of those exciting tools that can help to give more people the opportunity to share their stories, where you look at how images and videos can be generated. People can create their own films from their own homes on a lower budget. And that is an amazing opportunity that we can use. So I think it comes back to empowering the individual and making sure that everybody has the resources they need to share their stories and to then connect with people that would be interested in learning from their stories. So I think there's a lot of tools there that we can use.
Indeed. And thank you. And speaking of tools, Ruth, we talk about the filter, but we also talk about the avatar. The avatar seemingly is becoming more authentic week by week. And now that we know that we can use AI to be able to control a deep fake of our own selves and almost near human eye resolutions, we talk about the nature of the avatar. I know you have extensive use in virtual worlds and dealing with an avatar, and there's a bit of apprehension and fear for people of all ages and all generations, assuming the likeness of an avatar that's supposed to be representing them. And instead of us looking at the dark side of the avatar, maybe we might be able to focus with someone that has real experience in understanding the benefit of avatar development itself. And might we be able to embark on what are the benefits on a societal level when we start interacting with our virtual selves?
Yeah, more than ever before, as I've been listening to all the wisdom here, I keep hearing the words, human, know thyself. Know thyself. The more that I can take this technology and let it echo me back to me and learn who I am, what a unique being that I am that will never be fully echoed through the technology, but I can learn about me, then I can hopefully sense better when there is a manipulation happening, when there is harm happening, but also learn how to know others. And so the nonverbals are a lot of how we communicate. And in these avatars, more and more, there's face tracking and there's a reflection of our humanity coming through. And what that can create is, even if you don't speak the same language, which of course AI is now solving for and more able to translate, you're learning to listen differently from the avatars, and you're learning how to synergize with a group of avatars and learn what is the most useful way to benefit this circle. I think there's a frontier we're just starting to lean in and discover around finding our village through this technology and letting that echo us back into our physical reality bodies to be more expressive and intentional with how we connect and what we're actually doing.
And indeed, as we talk about, and thank you, Ruth, as we talk about the use of avatars, what are we using it for? Well, we're ingressing into virtual environments and virtual worlds. And these virtual worlds that we operate in, Drew, they're becoming a lot more sophisticated. And we know there's incredible platforms that are building layer one chains and blockchain technology, and they're using distributed crypto assets and meme coins, altcoins, if you will, and perhaps even fiat converted currencies that will be able to be distributed on ledgers and blockchains. We think about DeFi, DAOs, dApps, and decentralization considerations as a whole. When we're operating in these virtual worlds, and to the audience there, do you spend time in a virtual world? And if so, for what? Is it for entertainment? Do you ingress for business? Do you have a desire to be able to operate fully within a virtual environment, an ecosystem? As mentioned before, we've become more virtual in the past 34 months than we have the past 34 years, and it doesn't seem that we're going back. Drew, as we move further into spatial computing, XR, Metaverse, call it what have you, as we move further into this, when it comes to AI-powered worlds, when it comes to buy and sell and trade within these ecosystems of consideration and biological reading of our own selves, anatomical structures, when we walk into these environments, Drew, what does the world and the intersect of Web3 and AI look like? And are we heading into a safe space?
Well, that is a packed question. There's a lot to unpack there.
Sure.
But it's great to think about. I think there's a few things, in terms of the virtualization of everything. It's inevitable that we sit in front of a monitor with a keyboard and sit all day long. That's not how humans were ever meant to do this. Not that walking around in a virtual world is either, but there's something, as interfaces change and as how we interact with technology changes, it opens up a lot of opportunities. And I think, when you get into Web3 and the concept of decentralization, there's a reason why that's gotten interwoven in with this VR AR technology, because decentralization is so key to creating systems. I mean, it's all about systems, right? If you create a system, look, the system that's not working is publicly traded companies have to grow year after year. It's impossible to do that without messing some stuff up and creating this rampant out of control, capitalism. And so how do we create systems that work? And I think that's where AI can come in, and that's how AI can be a good benefactor and a good partner with blockchain technology. There's scams, there's stuff that happens in these communities. People get defrauded, all that kind of stuff. And in a virtual world, we don't see the person. And as humans, we're adapted to read nonverbals and all this stuff, and none of that's there. And so I think that's where AI has the potential to really help with these technologies to sort of weed out the baddies, create systems that are actually sustainable. So that's my thought on that.
It's very interesting when we think about the augment and overlay of society itself, where I really look at the idea that I could pick up a FaceTime call and I believe that it's my friend that's calling me, but it's really not my friend. It's a completely hidden figure and a different person. And to know that I don't have to go into a virtual world to suspect what avatar that I'm talking to, that's actually happening right now in this world with whisper technology, since being able to simulate my voice in less than 7 minutes flat, and at the same time to be able to capture my likeness, if you will, and indiscernible to people that I have care for and have a care for me, and they don't know that they're talking to me. It's one thing to have a different face of a profile on somebody creating a fake profile on Instagram. It's a whole nother thing when there's movability in the matter of the situation. Thanks for sharing that, Drew. When I think about it, David, now when we've talked about with Ruth about the avatar, we talked about with Drew about the operations they're in this Web3 related world of centralized community. And just on that note, are we expecting to see a proliferation of new communities that are going to be developed and deployed in this world that are based on these emerging technologies of the metaverse and AI, David?
Yeah, I think so. I like to think of them, at least one segment of them called meta communities. They would be communities that exist in an overlay on life. So an overlay in the spatial computing world, the physical reality, the virtual world, and even these layers on top of the web. So basically a portable community that goes with you. And I'm sure there's going to be many other types of communities, but for me, it's really interesting to think about how AI can help communities work better, or even groups of people. We talk a lot about personal assistance, and it's pretty clear that you can get any type of personal assistant that you want these days. You can get Michael Jordan to tell you how to shoot hoops, and Tiger to help you learn how to play golf. I mean, you can get a wellness coach. It could be someone famous, just through these large language models. But I think what's going to become really interesting is the work of a guy named David E. Smith. He calls it the augmented conversation. It's really coming back to what Douglas Engelbart was talking about in the 1960s and 1970s, about how AI and computers can help us have better conversations, can help us collaborate and coordinate better, so that we can actually tackle our planetary challenges. And that's what we don't have right now with today's web, but it certainly will be enabled by emerging technologies like AI, but also the immersive technologies as well.
Thank you, David. I find it fascinating, something that Isabel de Rutten said: if we don't have people, then we don't have technology. If we don't have humanity, we don't have technology. And Lena, I'm coming back to you, and I think it's worth coming back to you on the subject of climate. We see the great disruption that's happening, and the climate is out there. I mean, look at our great state of New York, covered in soot and ash and smoke. When it happened just last week, when we talk about the great fires of the Canadian fires and flow and travel, and you would think that there's a way to be able to disrupt that. Are you leaning in when it comes to AI for climate because you have determined that this is the most important focal point and maybe the greatest way for us to use AI right now to disrupt when it comes to climate solvency? Your mic, Lena. We'll let you figure it out in just a moment. Okay, you good? Go ahead.
I think not only climate, but AI can play a significant role in addressing social challenges by analyzing vast amounts of data and identifying patterns and generating insights. It can contribute to sustainable solutions by optimizing resource usage and predicting and mitigating environmental risks, and facilitating smart city planning to make communities not just sustainable, but also safer for women. And AI can also assist in renewable energy management and climate modeling, and advancing sustainable agricultural practices, ultimately promoting a more sustainable and regenerative future.
You bring up a great case for a future debate and argument that's certainly to be had. While some people say we need to take a pause from it, listen, for us that have been using AI, it has been a great benefit to our daily activity and workflow. I use AI, and it's been a great benefit for my studies and research, and I actually find myself learning from it. I literally interact and communicate with it. And so I don't feel like it's such a taboo subject to say that publicly to the thousands of people that are here watching with us right now on GatherVerse.live, and those that are sitting with us here on this panel and our other different social platforms. I don't look at this as a taboo subject. I don't want to feel like it's a taboo subject. I do have a real concern about what it can do into the degradation of society, and it almost feels as if this is a drug. Something that you feel like, gee, now that I've used it for so long, how did I ever manage without it? But at the same time, I know that it influences in some capacity to the degradation of the societal ecosystem and infrastructure of how we operate in present times. And so it's a very interesting contrast and dichotomy, Aleda. You got something on that?
I believe I do. That was a lot that you just put out there. The biggest thing that I will say is I also interact with the AI. I love it tremendously for a couple of different reasons. One is back to communication point. It actually writes my words, like what I'm wanting to say, what I'm really challenged sometime to say. And it will take my my word choices, the way that I would go about writing, the way that I would love to write, and it will actually eloquently put that in place for me. And I read it and I'm like, yes, that's so exactly what I just wanted to say. I've done the same thing, plugging information in, just experimenting with it. Like, I wonder, like, what's it going to tell me about myself if I have it right about this person, right? And these key characteristics, what is it going to relay back to me? So again, that point of, I feel like it can also be very empowering, right? And I feel like also avatar communication allows a lot of people who maybe feel disempowered to be able to take on more of an empowering role on a screen and be able to talk about and air and release some of their vulnerabilities that they might not be able to do in a face-to-face scenario because of perhaps traumas or different situations that they've had. So, you know, again, on the overall whole, on the forefront, I see it as hugely beneficial. Again, mirroring ourselves, just like Ruth said. It's an opportunity.
And it is an opportunity. And I think residually, and I'll speak for all of us, is that take advantage, adopt this technology, build with it, work with it, understand it, because as we've said, AI is not going to take your jobs, but somebody that knows how to use AI will. And it is replacing different infrastructure in society. And it's firm time that we take advantage of using this. With Drew with Web3 and Emily dealing with bias and Ruth dealing with virtual communities and Lena dealing with humanity, Lena championing the prospects of what this could be as a deterrent when it comes to climate, and David building when it comes to community centralization. We welcome and we thank all of you for being with us today, panel. Take care. Farewell. And with that said, it brings us to the conclusion of Ethical Summit. It certainly happened quick. It certainly happened fast. I feel a bit emotional when I hear all the testimonies, the expressions, and the voice amplified by our community. I feel a little concerned that we've barely scratched the surface today. Did we get far enough? Is GatherVerse serving a purpose? Are we doing what we're supposed to do? Did you get any enjoyment from your time with us today? Did you learn anything? Did you get to take something with you that you didn't have this morning or this evening, no matter where you're at? If you did, will you share this message with others? Will you join us for the future endeavors and engagements? And will you manifest what you've come to find out and learn about today? Will you reach with not just the GatherVerse community, but other communities and technology platforms that have dedicated their whole entire platforms for human betterment? Some we don't even know that exist. Will you reach out to me, give me some encouragement, tell me that we're doing right, or tell me that I'm doing wrong when it comes to what we're doing with GatherVerse? Is there a better way to look at all this? We're all just finding out together, really. In short, and in the end, this brings us to day one of an excursion of information. Tomorrow, we have Immersive Intelligence Summit, the intersection of AI and the Metaverse. What does that look like? What stands to threat? What stands to gain? What stands to benefit? To those at YouTube, we see you. We hear your voices. We see you. You're not alone. To organizations out there that are operating, I know it may feel desperate. You may not have capital. You're not alone. To the speakers, to the workers, to those that just lost their jobs and dealing hard with their families, you're not alone. We're here. We're doing our best. And that's all that we can do as we move forward into this world that we find ourselves in. It's alarming and filled with opportunity, prospectively. Thank you for gathering with us. And for tomorrow, we hope that you would join us again. Lock hands. For the future, may our gather be well.